A hackathon is an event where people gather to solve a problem. It can be technical, educational, social, artistic, or related to any field. The Security Summit 2022 Hack will offer participants with training to up your skills in the world of technology.
Cause I be coding every week. When I'm down on my knees, I pray hard for the geeks. Cause I'm a geek.
Now, the hackathon has given us a theme of protecting the digital citizen in the fourth industrial revolution.
There's a lot of guys that have come from here that have actually got opportunities in the working place. They've gone from the hackathons. They're sitting inside organizations now, being ethical hackers, things like this.
The CGI that we had to exploit and then protect it from the red team exit.
So I'm participating in the ITO Security Summit, and this is my second year participating in the ITO Security Summit. So the first time I participated in the summit was last year. So my team and I have been working on a project.
When they need help with their hardware or programming, we come in and tap in there as makers and show them how it's done. Shout out to the hack guys, cool solutions, good hacking.
Electric power, no time for flowers. We code for hours. Look at the things that we make. Look at the things that we do. They thought we're crazy. They start calling us fools. Cause when I'm down on my knees, I'll be praying for the I'm gonna take a trip to the skin, take the work. I'm gonna go and take the skin, take the work. Cause it's a hackathon. Cause it's a work, yeah. Cause I be hungry. It's like it's it's like girls on set, like it's woman is that, like it's a geek. I'm a geek. I'm a geek. Are you geeks? Like we can build music with geeks. Take over the geeks like making music. Who are you?
Oh, good morning, South Africa. How's it? Dumelang, Sanbonani, Absheni, and all of the above. Welcome to this year's Security Summit Hackathon, Ideathon. We are live on YouTube. Do join in through the different communication channels. And my name is Tiani Ngonyama, and I will be your host this morning as we kick off this year's edition of the Security Summit Hackathon. And this is where it's all about learning. It's all about ensuring that you're growing. So before we get started, actually, let's just quickly go through some of the house rules. Do ask questions on the chat. Let's be respectful to each other. Let's ensure that we are all here to learn and ensure that we're able to grow as much as possible. Do use the hashtag SS2022Hack to be able to interact. Do let the world know that you are part of this amazing platform called the Security Summit Hackathon. And this year it is jam-packed. And another thing to note is that this hackathon is created for you. It's been running since 2017, and it is to ensure that as you build those applications, you're building security in mind. We do have speakers that will be taking you through the different things that what you need to know to ensure that you are preparing for the hackathon. And then the purpose of today is to ensure that as we get ready for the hackathon, you get trained, you get to hear from industry leaders, you get to hear from practitioners, and also get to engage with them through this platform. So the Ideathon is here to ensure that you are able to learn firstly, and then also generate that idea for the hackathon, and then get guidance from mentors. So at the end of the Ideathon, we'll share the pipeline in terms of what you need to do until Tuesday, because your team will need to submit a document that will ensure that your team gets assessed to participate. And that is also good because you get feedback from the mentors, from some of the great minds in the cybersecurity space in South Africa. All right, so in terms of the schedule for this morning, we are starting off right now, and I am your host, Tiani Ngonyama, the COO of Geek Culture, and I've been sharing some of the things on the Security Summit Hackathon since 2017, and we have done the hackathon in various parts of the country, which is which has been amazing. And this year again, it is a national hackathon. Do let geeks from all parts of the country that the hackathon is happening, get them to be part of this. So we'll go through an opening by the CEO of IT Web, Mr. Ivan Regasek. We'll also hear from one of our favorites, Mr. Steve Jump. We'll also hear from a public sector perspective. And then we'll also hear from other speakers, including Oshia Bowens. And then also for the third year now, we are having the Capture the Flag Challenge. And the gentlemen that will be leading the Capture the Flag Challenge are here to guide you. So Nathan Naidu will be giving a presentation, as well as Manuel Gregor. And then after that, we'll take questions. And then thereafter, we'll go through a working session where you get to formulate, ideate, and perfect those ideas with guidance from the mentors. So do check your emails. We sent a link to Sonke. So just get to that platform so that we can be able to assist you better, and you will be submitting whatever is needed from the Ideathon through Sonke. So yeah, that's essentially it in terms of the day's schedule. It is all about learning, it is about discovering, but I also want to give a shout out to the geeks that are watching from Salt Lake University in one place as well. So let's ensure that all of us will start to gather our teams. Let's gather each other to ensure that we are able to learn and build those solutions. All right, so without any further ado, let's get started. Shortly after this, Mr. Ivan Regasek will be coming through to give you opening remarks and also around the feel and why the Security Summit Hackathon 2022 is taking place.
Okay. Good, thank you, Tiani. Thank you, Tiani, for the wonderful welcome and intro. Good morning, fellow hackers, geeks. Yeah, it's a cold Saturday morning, but we're here, so we're geeks. And yeah, I should have done a dry run.
Just hover over the slides.
Yeah.
And or I can progress them. I can progress the.
But where is it? It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. Welcome. IT Web Security Summit Hackathon Ideathon. It's a mouthful. Somebody might be at the gate. I think the sandwich is at the gate. Please answer it in the keys for the gate are here, Daisy. Yeah, it's a mouthful, so let's break it down. How do I move the screen, the slides? Okay, so firstly, what is the Security Summit? It's an event for cybersecurity professionals that's been running since 2005. It's in its 17th year. Back at the time, it wasn't very cool to be a hacker, or it wasn't mainstream. It was a guy with the pizza stains. I think we'll hear more today about what a hacker is these days. But yeah, I don't know. Security was kind of based on you have a local network, and I don't know, the whole thing. IT was not important to business. It was a side thing. But now, 17 years later, security is a huge thing for everybody, for all the citizens, for all of our data on social and stuff. We all know about some IT security and protecting our social accounts, and we know about our data that we have in the cloud. So yeah, organizations have been battling with this for since IT came about. And yeah, it's an event where the top people in the country, in the industry gather. They talk about the current issues. I believe the themes for this year are showing the value of it, the business value. It's changed a lot. The role of the CISO has become more and more important. The role of cybersec. The CEOs need to know about it. The change with the remote workplaces, and how does this affect security? Can you hack people when they're working from home? And just the constant change. One thing that isn't changing, or is changing, that it just happens more and more, is that people get hacked. Every so often there's high-profile cases in the news. There was TransUnion that exposed all the citizen data. The hackers claim they have it. Now this many records. Doesn't matter. There's some famous victims through the years, and this year. But yeah, it just shows us how prevalent it is, and it is very scary to think that hackers have all your information and know exactly what credit you took for what throughout your life. So I don't know. The hackers are the good guys. So let's see. Next video. Slide, Ben. How do I? Well, can you show me how to do it? Huh? You're driving. Okay. Okay. So what is the hackathon? We've been running the hackathon with Geek Culture, IT Web, since 2017. Is that right, Tammy? 2017. In 2020, we had a virtual one. Unfortunately, last year we missed it. It was a crazy. Yeah, I don't know. The pandemic was crazy for everybody. But we're back. The great news is that we're back, and that we're looking forward to a room full with a vibe, full of some hackers doing some hacking. And it's at the sidelines of this industry event. It's in Sandton Convention Center, and it runs for 48 hours throughout the night. So the top participants will be, the spaces at the venue are limited, and the top participants will compete at the venue. But I think you guys know what a hackathon is. That's why you're here. Next slide. Please, thank you. Yeah, so what's an Ideathon? And this is the Ideathon security training. So the focus of this hackathon is on cybersecurity. In many ways, it can be, which we'll talk about, and the speakers will talk about today. But yeah, unfortunately, we're doing this one virtually, but watch it, rewatch it, learn something, and yeah, you'll do your submissions, and then hopefully we'll see you there. So next slide. Okay, so fellow geeks, I've got a question which crossed my mind, and it's who is a hacker? We always I actually got a sneak peek at one of the presentations, and they'll be talking more about the image, but it's an interesting thing. But what's the difference between a hacker and a geek? We all geeks. What's the difference? Is it the same thing? So let's look at the definition. I found some definitions of both. So please, next slide. So it says a hacker, and this is interesting. It is kind of how I always think about it when I think about what a hacker really is someone who makes stuff with an axe or hacks a tree. You decide that you're going to cut the tree, you want the tree, and then you just want chip, chip, chip. And it doesn't seem like you're going anywhere until one last chip and the tree falls down. It's a little bit like solving IT problems. You figure you get an inspiration that you can, maybe you can figure something out, and you chip, 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 and it doesn't seem to be working till one day the tree falls down. So, number two, one who programs enthusiastically, even obsessively, or who enjoys programming rather than just theorizing about programming. Person who is good at programming quickly and expert or enthusiast of any kind. One might even be an astronomy hacker. Wow. But yeah, so we can see that somebody that's very good and somebody that's an expert, sometimes even obsessive. Next slide, please, Ben. In a geek, a person who has chosen concentration rather than conformity, one who pursues skill, especially technical skill and imagination, not mainstream social acceptance. So it's people with a great attitude, people that pursue skill instead of admiration or social acceptance. And we all geeks. It says has a strong case of neophilia. I don't even know what it means, but it says most geeks are adept with computers and treat hacker as a term of respect. But not all hackers themselves, and some who are in fact hackers normally call themselves geeks anyway, because they, quite properly, regard hacker as a label that should be bestowed by others rather than self-assumed. So it's a badge that geeks give to other real geeks when they become really good and when they become an expert. Next slide, please, Ben. So the program for today, and it is my absolute privilege and I'm very excited to listen to the program, to introduce the program. Because you'll be listening from some real OG hackers. And I'm sure we will learn. So Steve will tell us about why designing applications with security in mind is a good idea. Steve has been in the industry for longer than some of you are alive. He's been at executive tables dealing with all sorts of security issues. And he knows a lot about the subject, and it's a subject he's passionate about. Muzi will talk about why the government and even the country itself is looking at you guys, the next generation of geeks, to make our government and country better. So that's a very important issue in the country. And although we're hacking and having fun, some of it actually turns out to be quite important. Then we'll have a distinguished international accredited speaker, O'Shea Bowens. I'm not 100% sure on what his talk will be today, but I've listened to some of his talks in the past and they're amazing. And yeah, he runs his own, he's a CEO. Many of these people, CEO, MD, CEO, CIO, you see, OGs. And yeah, we'll hear from him. And Nathan, my good friend, a really good friend of the Security Summit Hackathon. Will be, I know first it's Manny. Manny from Telspace. Really looking forward to his talk. He can be quite technical, so that's why I like it, and very geeky, hacky. He will be defending. There will be a CTF challenge during the thing. Telspace will be attacking, and Nathan will be defending. I've looked at some of the challenges for the CTF challenge. It looks very fun. And yeah, they will be telling you more about that, but I'm really looking forward to it. Next slide. 2 minutes, yeah. Okay, so just before I end the welcome and the overview, I've also had a lifetime of being an application dev or mobile dev or some sort of application for many years, since I was young. And security wasn't the first thing that I learned. I learned a lot of things myself. And the one lesson that I can share that really stood out for me, and it was kind of probably the first one also, is why would somebody do that? Why would somebody send a SQL injection string instead of a name when my form asked for a name? But I realized that it's because they can. Sometimes people just want to see what happens if I change the numbers on top. And once we get to money and valuable data and things that you can make money of, then they definitely will. So if we don't think about security, we'll get taken for a ride. Next slide. Yeah. So we're looking for real hackers. The most important thing is let's have fun. Let's learn and have fun. I read maybe most of the submissions. There's some interesting ideas. Some of you guys say that you just want to learn. Please enjoy the show. And may the real hackers please stand up. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for that, Ivan. Very inspiring talk. Just to also highlight your curiosity from a very early age as to why would someone just send an SQL injection. So that is exactly why we are here. We're here to find out why would someone do that, and also how do we counter it, and that will be quite important. But speaking of countering, it is very much important to always have a mindset of saying that if I'm building an application, security must become a design issue. It must not be a by the way. How do you get to that mindset? Our next presenter, actually, I was not supposed to introduce him, but he said that sometimes when he gets on stage, he even forget his own name. But you'll see why we call him the digital fossil. It is, of course, Mr. Steve Jump. He will be taking us through a secure by design overview, and what could really go wrong. What could really go wrong? We'll hear from Steve just now.
Good morning, everybody. I think I should say thank you for that introduction, but I'm reserving judgment for later. Now, we're here to get ideas for hacks at a hackathon. And that's brilliant, because that means we're going to have to be thinking, and we're going to have to be thinking about new stuff, how to repurpose old stuff, how to do things that haven't been done before in ways that we need to do. Now, the real fun part of this from my side is I like to design things that work. But we are living in a world where working doesn't just mean doing what we thought we were doing, but we need to make sure that no one else can use what we've done in such a way that it can be done wrong or used against us. So I'm going to try and instill a little bit of forward thinking. And those of you who've seen me bouncing around the stage, trying not to fall off the edge, know that this is a topic of conversation that I am frequently bringing to the fore. It's not the easy part of security. This is actually the hard part. In fact, it's the hard part of any design process. What could possibly go wrong? And what I'm going to talk about now for the next 10 to 15 minutes is why what goes wrong is not someone else's problem, it's actually your problem. And when you are in the process of coming up with a brilliant idea, which I'm hoping this afternoon we're going to be talking about how brilliant those ideas are, but when you are actually doing this in your real job, in your real world, where your ideas are part of your business, your profession, or part of how you're helping society to become stronger, I want you to never forget this, almost as a mantra. If you haven't asked the question, what could possibly go wrong when you've got a brilliant idea, you actually have no way of knowing how brilliant your idea can be. So security by design starts with the same thought process that your brilliant solution is going to be. Now, we're talking about a security hackathon. We're taking the focus on secure design and putting it up front. But in any normal hackathon where you're designing something, you're trying to come up with something that works. That's great. So when you're trying to design something that works, you have a reason for doing it. So we're taking it back to basics. Look, it's fairly early. It's a Saturday morning. I'm probably guessing most of you aren't on your second coffee yet. I know, speaking for myself, that's also not true. But I'm going to take it easy. I'd like you to think about what I'm saying. And as you start to come up with your ideas, map back to these words. And if you've got questions, please bring them back to me or the rest of the panel later on during the day. But do you know what you are doing? Okay, that's not a philosophical question. In terms of the hack, do you know what your objectives are? You're going to have ideas. This whole thing is a design process. Design process is an intellectual exercise. It is taking your creativity and putting it towards a purpose, which is design. That design will have a function, it will do something. And we are always encouraging you. Exploit opportunities for the benefit of all, for the benefit of your business, for the benefit of your community, for the benefit of your family. Opportunity is something you should be seeking. We can improve it. So the fact that it's been done before, we can do it better, we can do it cheaper, we can do it in a more secure way, just throwing that out there, because I tend to plug security for some random reason. And of course, it can be innovative, which means we're doing something new that hasn't been done before. So we're going to be discussing, and by the time we've gone through this Ideathon, you will have discussed, you will have modeled, you will have compared, and you will have defined the set of solutions that are part of your hack. And that's going to become your proposal, which is going through to the hackathon. Sounds simple. And every single one of you knows how to do this. It's automatic. Do you know what finished looks like? Because it's easy to get seduced in the design process and just keep on going and keep on going. It can be addictive. But you have an objective. If you don't have an objective, it's time to think of one. For a security hackathon, the objective is going to be doing something that you can prove has been done in a secure way. Plain and simple. Well, actually, it's not quite that simple. Because you're going to need some kind of guideline, some kind of specification, excuse me. I'm talking ahead of myself, so when you design something, you need some kind of specifications to define where you are going. So your objective will have some kind of conditions, they become the specifications that match it. Will your solution need to work with the rest of the world? Is it a standalone? Or is it going to plug into a network and talk to other services? So compatibility is important. You need to be thinking how well it will work. Life cycle. Is this something that you're basically doing today, use today, throw away tomorrow? Or is this a product that you hope is going to build your billion-rand empire? And will you need to upgrade it during its life cycle? All of these are design considerations. They are more than you might need to do for a security hack. But I want you to start thinking using these parameters anytime you come against the design, because secure by design isn't something you pick up for a hackathon. These are principles that you adopt that give you a competitive advantage. And of course, whatever you make needs to be kept working. Have you considered that in your design at the beginning? And then, of course, it's, I can't actually read my words on the screen here. Availability. How often is this going to need to be changed, and how reliable does that need to be? So all of these would define finished for a project. In your security hack, you'll have an equivalent of all these milestones, and you'll be able to explain those in your proposal and eventually when the judges are giving you a hard time at the end. So let's come back to the real basics. Do you understand the rules? These aren't the rules of the hackathon. These are the rules of business. If you're making something that works with the rest of the world, it needs to comply with standards. So sometimes you miss it and you don't get a standard. Is that a problem? It might or it might not be. You need to know. Does your product, code, application, whatever you're going to be doing, come across regulations? Do you deal with other people's information? Are you using copyrighted information? Could someone with copyrighted information come back to bite you? And are you touching on laws? These are all areas in which things can go spectacularly wrong. So here's the first hint. Cybersecurity is all about keeping the bad guys out. You'll hear about information security from many, many people, including me. But to keep things simple, cybersecurity in its simplest form is you are trying to keep the cyber criminals out. So the cyber criminals want to steal or destroy or otherwise profit from your hard work. And here's a deep thought for you on a Saturday morning. Security, any form of security, and especially cybersecurity, is not an emergent property of a normal product development cycle. By that, I mean that if you are following the path from brilliant idea to perfect working product, security never comes into that conversation unless you put it there deliberately by intention. And if you pick up nothing from me today or in any of my other talks, security has to be considered a primary design requirement. You cannot add it at the end, and if you have failed to include it, you will almost never be able to retrofit it. But if you can design it at the beginning, there's two tricks to take away. One, it is simpler to implement, and two, it improves the quality of your product to the point that it will actually reduce the cost of building, operating, and maintaining your product. That is the secret sauce that I tell business about, and it's the reason why they keep paying me to go through these stories with them. Because security delivered in the right way makes your product more usable, more saleable, and it makes it easier to maintain. Plain and simple. It makes work easier. But we're back here to consider, do you know what could possibly go wrong with your design? And if you know, have you thought about how to present it? Okay, screens are bouncing around in front of me. I don't think that's too much caffeine. Yes, thank you. Yeah, don't panic. When I'm talking about what could possibly go wrong and my complete visual experience reorganizes in front of my head, I'm worried it's my brain. Okay, it's the coffee. Anyway, so as Hippocrates said, first do no harm. Now, those of you not studying medicine probably have not got a clue who this is, but this guy set the rules for doctors and medicine. It says when you are trying to cure a problem, don't make it any worse. And this is a very useful concept. When you are trying to design something that is going to make the world better, try and make sure it doesn't hurt anybody. So your idea, your hack, your creation, your magical new opportunity, it's going to do something useful. It's going to add value, store value, or create value. Now for this, I'm saying value is information. Information, at its simplest form, is data that has been processed. If you do anything to process data, you're spending time and effort on it. That time and effort, even if you are a student, takes time, and time is money. So information is data that has had value added to it. You don't want that value to be misused, you don't want that value to be stolen, and you don't want that value to be lost. So the question is, can that value be stolen? Well, does your design allow it to be stolen? Did you even think it could be stolen? Could that same value be used to harm the owner or others? If I misuse that information, can I make things happen that my design was not supposed to do? This is the conversation you have during your design. And it's really the only time you can have this at a sensible level, because every time you consider what can go wrong after you've finished the design, and the worst possible outcome of this is when someone else comes and says, did you know that this went wrong? Because that's normally when you're either making the headlines, you might have the police knocking at the door, or your bank may have decided that they're no longer going to lend you any money. These are all the nasty kind of wrongs that can affect you as a designer, even as a business owner. So can that value be used to harm the owner or others? And then if it is damaged, what happens to you? Consider that, because the whole stream of brilliant design, brilliant idea, brilliant product is fantastic if it's doing what your brilliance said it should do. Making sure others can't use your brilliance against you is one of your design criteria, something to consider. So, how can we prevent harm? Well, that's actually what the Security Hackathon is all about. Most hackathons are about brilliant ideas, brilliant products, and exploiting brilliant potential. We have a specific angle in the Security Hackathon to encourage you to think about the ways in which we can prevent harm. So the focus over the entirety of the hackathon and in the Ideathon today is to look at how we can identify what is wrong and how we can prove that we are actually solving it. So this might sound obvious. Basic testing is a requirement. It's not just a requirement, it's a mandatory requirement. If you can't test, you can't prove it's working. So do you know how to test your idea? And do you know what to test? I'm hoping the answer from all of you is yes, we know what to test because we know what we're trying to do. But what you are usually trying to do is make it work. We need to be very aware of technical vulnerabilities that could be maliciously exploited. Those are big words to say, if we get it wrong, someone is gonna hurt us. You're gonna listen to some very gifted presenters over the next 2 hours who will be talking about, in your code, how you can look for these vulnerabilities, how you can build vulnerability detection into your design cycle, how you can start thinking secure by design from the very first line of code that you write, and how you can prove it and test it all the way through your design cycle until you're ready to print for production. In other words, make it real for the world. Understanding how that works, you need to understand what a vulnerability is. In its simplest terms, and I'm not going to go into the technology, it is something that can go wrong. Plain and simple. My whole pretext today is, do you know what can possibly go wrong? Coding vulnerabilities is certainly one of them. And a large part of today is going to be, how do you find what those vulnerabilities are? And how do you learn to code so they aren't automatically there? That is one side of it. But you can have the most perfectly written code that has no technical vulnerabilities, but the functionality of your code itself can have elements, I was trying to find a more politically correct, but can have elements that are basically stupid. But they are correctly written, they are correctly coded, and they are technically not subject to vulnerabilities. However, in the operation, which is by design is the correct operation of your product, they do stupid things that can cause harm. That is part of the thinking process. Thinking out and around your ideas. The idea that works is the one that gets you excited. And it's the one that should get you excited, because that excitement is what drives you to become better engineers, better coders, better geeks. It is that search for perfection. Here's a quick hint. I don't want to send out the spoiler, but as long as you are motivated by searching for perfection, your journey and career is going to be fun. Perfection is hard to reach. Good enough that is better than your competitors is a world-beating capability. On that path, you need to make sure that your good is better than the competition. You need to make sure that your best is beyond compromise by bad third parties. Calling them cyber criminals for short. These are more philosophical than technical, but bear in mind your responsibility is to think secure at the beginning. It's a property that you have to design into your code, into your product, into your applications, into your entire idea process. You need to start thinking good, positive, better, and remove possibilities of exploit from the very beginning. Eventually, you start to think that way before you write your first line of code, and all the code that you have written has already been tested to be technically secure. You have no idea how big a benefit that will be to your future productivity if your standard reference code model, the way you think code, is intrinsically secure, you will be ahead of about 80% of the developers in the world today. Part of this conversation is to try and get it that 80% of all developers are producing secure code automatically without having to think about it. It's an intrinsic capability of a secure future. So, all your features, the ones that excite you, are they necessary? How safe can you make their use? Could they be used against you? And could you fix it? If you can't fix it, that becomes a design choice, but you have accountability for that. It's not someone else's responsibility. So, we're done. Or are we? What happens when you've finished? When your brilliant idea has people banging on your door because they want to spend money on your design, selling it to lots of people, buying your code, taking your product, employing you as a chief designer, all of these things. We're heading for this. What happens when you have finished with your product? After the SS hack, yeah, you'll hopefully understand how to do it more securely, but those capabilities make you a more capable, make you a more productive, and they certainly make you a more advantageous partner or employee, whichever way you choose to go. So what happens when you finish with your design? And of course, it works. Don't forget, you are aiming for something that works. This is the exciting part. Everything comes together. You finish your final build. You plug it all together. It looks exactly the way you wanted it to look, and it does exactly what you wanted it to do. Believe me, that's exciting. It's exciting, it's slightly addictive, and it really is what makes this work. So if you're planning to be a hacker, hack your own code, hack other people's code, the goal that drives you, motivates you, is coming up with something that works and you are proud of. So if we have done this and you've designed it securely, you have something that has your name on it, your company, your personal name, and you are taking the credit for every brilliant and successful moment. Nothing to be scared of. This is why we do it. But who are they going to call if it breaks? Simple enough question. What if your product is attacked? Would you know? Would your customers know? What happens? If it's compromised, or if it kills a customer, okay, that last one is extreme, but I've seen some of the soldering at these hackathons and they give me some cause for concern. So let's not go too far down that way. But let's assume this is it. You've made it, it works, you've sold it. The beginnings of your empire, let's just say you're already driving the brand new BMW and you're considering the Ferrari. You are successful. But who are they going to call if it breaks? It's simple. No, they're not going to call nobody. They're going to call you. Okay, and you may not get the Ghostbusters reference, but there ain't nobody else they're going to call. It's going to be you. So if you're going to be asked to fix it, you need to have designed it to be secure, supportable, maintainable, and you need to be behind it for however long you need it to go. So thank you for listening to this. Not so technical. The technical part's going to follow. But if you're already thinking, how can I make sure it's going to work? The technical wizardry that you are going to be exposed to over the next 2 hours and from all of the mentors during the hackathon will allow you not just to be hackers, but to be elite hackers of the first order. Thank you. Remember, what could possibly go
All right. Thank you so much for that, Steve. I hope everyone has enjoyed a great deal of that presentation. It's always great to hear such wisdom. And he highlighted quite a number of things. And as you know, working with data is quite important. And Steve has highlighted a whole range of things around ensuring that if you are working with data, you need to consider the customer. You know, what could go wrong? And remember, if something goes wrong, you are to blame for that. So let's ensure that we take those learnings, we take those nuggets from Steve to ensure that whatever we're coming up with has security in mind. It is secure by design, and we must not make security to be a by the way thing. So before we move on to the next presentation, just note a few things. Firstly, please do drop your questions on the chat there on YouTube. And another thing is, so the way that the hackathon is structured, it is like this. It is normal hackathon that some of you would know, where you need to come up with a solution. You need to build a solution around there. So that solution that you are building needs to have security. It needs to have considered security. We'll provide more guidance on the judging criteria on that. But your solution needs to be secure. It needs to have considered all the principles around secure by design. And then also we have a capture the flag challenge. So there's a hackathon challenge where it is solution based, and a capture the flag challenge. So not everyone is expected to take part in the CTF challenge. There will be some of you that will choose to go through the CTF challenge, or you choose to build a solution that is secure, essentially. So that's something to keep in mind, that we've got a security innovation challenge, and also a capture the flag challenge, which is led by our good friends from Telspace and Snowed. So speaking of Snowed, the next presenter is actually one of the brains around the idea of an ideathon, to say that let's essentially start off and prepare the solutions ahead of the hackathon as such. So I can see Nathan is there. Good morning, Nathan. How's it?
Morning, buddy. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you guys caught me by surprise because I'm supposed to be going up last, but let's do this.
Yeah, no worries. We are just looking forward to your presentation. So in the CTF challenge, there's a very cool thing that is happening. So Snowd will be leading and coaching the teams that are in the blue team, and then Telspace will be leading the team in the red teams, essentially. So you've got two great organizations with two great minds behind the CTF challenge, and Nathan is essentially one of the brains that has been part of conceptualizing this hackathon from the beginning and helping it make possible. But I'm going to let Nathan just take over to take us through, the blue team, the good guys. He's a good guy.
So guys, the first thing is I just want to thank ITWeb, Geek Culture, Telspace, Steve, the previous presenter. There's a consistent theme we're using today, and the theme is essentially security by design. So in staying with that theme, I wanted to show you guys how we use design and simulation as a principle in Snowd to actually build our defenses. So just to help you guys, these slides are quite verbose. I'm going to switch off my camera so that you guys can focus on the content, right? Okay. So the thing I want to teach you guys today is how to simulate an attack. Now, there's three types of like broad attack type of simulations. The first is physical, which is what Manny and them do at Telspace. And that's where we actually conduct a real world attack on the environment. It's a very high fidelity simulation, delivers very accurate results, but it's dangerous, right? There's risk to systems. It's also point in time, and it takes a considerable amount of skills and resources. The second one is emulation. Emulation is what we use at Snowd, and essentially we create in a lab environment, we emulate certain platforms, and then we try and understand malware that threat actors are using, the tooling, vulnerabilities, etc. The problem with that approach is it's also very resource intensive because you have to build a copy of real world systems and you have to put it into a lab. So the third one is modeling. Modeling may not be as high fidelity as actually doing a pen test, but modeling definitely has a lot of benefits. It's fast. You can cast a wide range across digital risk. And essentially, it's a desktop exercise. So anyone can do it. And this is the different approach that we're taking with our Blue Team CTF this year. To make the CTF a little bit more accessible, I've chosen for the Ideathon to not be a very technical challenge, but rather one of design and thinking. So let's talk about why essentially we'd want to simulate an attack. If we can understand the attacker's tools, tradecraft, and procedures, we can design the defenses. So it's a pity Manny didn't come up before me, but one of the things Manny will talk to you guys is about performing threat modeling and attack trees. If we can understand the attack patterns, we can design the defensive controls, either preventative controls or detective controls. And what the modeling allows us to do is to actually test the responsiveness of maybe the teams, like the incident response team, and the design and implementation of the control, and the operational effectiveness. Now let's take an example. At the lowest base level, you're going to collect cyber threat intelligence on a particular threat actor. You're going to try and understand, who they target, what their modus operandi is, what tooling they use, what's the initial attack vector. And essentially from that data, what you're going to get is either IOCs, so indicators of compromise. Maybe you'll get indicators of attack. And you could possibly get indicators of vulnerability. However, the pyramid I've put there next to the process that we follow, which is, to gather the threat intelligence, identify these indicators, and convert these indicators into defensive controls, is called the pyramid of pain. See, the problem is an MD5 checksum or an IP address or a DNS name is pretty trivial to change. So if I want to circumvent your detective process, it's quite easy to do. This is why we use behavior-based testing. So we use something like the Lockheed Martin kill chain to describe attacker behaviors by breaking down the general behavior of an attacker into various different activities, starting with initial compromise, execution, persistence, lateral movement, exfiltration. And then what we do is we classify each of these threats based on the methodology that they use or the behaviors for each of these phases of the attack pattern. And if you can design advanced analytics to defend against their patterns of behavior, you sort of break their methodology. Now, it's easy to change your IP address. It's easy to change an MD5. It's kind of difficult to change your tooling, but it's possible. But your procedures, your approach, your methodology, those are difficult things to change. And that's why they move more towards the top of the pyramid of pain, because now you're making things a little bit more painful for the attacker. So what you do here is you understand their patterns of behavior. You acquire some of the data for analysis. So if you think about how we emulate their behavior in a lab, we will then take various data points, whether it be the network, the endpoint, the log files, whatever, and we develop analytical solutions for these things. And whether that's, let's take a simple example. You've got a piece of malware that self-propagates through a network using NetBIOS. So what the malware does is the malware gets onto a machine, it infects the patient 0, and then it starts scanning the network for NetBIOS ports, 137, 139, 445, whatever the case may be. Once it finds open shares, maybe it transfers a ransomware note and maybe a ransomware executable. Now, sure, we can track the MD5 for the ransomware executable. But the pattern of behavior, the fact that a machine on the network suddenly starts scanning and enumerating on NetBIOS ports and then starts transferring files randomly client to client, that is the pattern of behavior that you can use to drive detection. Now, sure, I'm not bringing into things like preventative controls. A lot of threat actors use PowerShell, disabling PowerShell. Where our focus is today is understanding the attacker and designing defenses. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about threat modeling. I wasn't going to go into it because I think Manny was going to touch on it. But essentially, if you take a look at the following two pictures that I've got on screen, what you have is you have an attack objective that's on the top of the picture in the red circle. And my attack objective in this example is unauthorized network access. And one of the ways I'm going to get unauthorized network access, and there's various ways there, is I'm going to use the remote access facility, so their VPN. Now, there's various ways I could get through the VPN. Maybe it's got an easy guessable password. Maybe I'm going to brute force it. But in the same breath, maybe, like, for example, I'm going to buy credentials. So I go to an employee and I say, hey, listen, I'll pay you X amount of money to provide me with your VPN credentials. That kind of activity is happening, and it's actually quite rife in South Africa, because it's a lot easier to buy somebody's credentials than it is to find a working exploit against a well-secured VPN product. Now, the thing you need to understand is once you have the attack tree, which is something typically Manny would design before he would attack a client, as you work from the root, which is the attack objective, down the branches, which is sort of the attack pattern, down to the leaves, which is going to be the bottom of the tree, you can work your way from the leaves to the branches back to the root by designing defenses. So how do I counter all these activities? Now, I've given you examples in the green boxes. And things you need to think about is, number one, what's the likelihood of the risk occurring? How effective would my control be? Would it be partially effective? Would it be completely effective? Can it be circumvented? And what you need to do is then you need to design the controls and then evaluate. So for example, let's just say we were designing an application like Steve used as an example, and I would draw a whole lot of attack trees to attack my own application. What I would do is, this is before I even started coding, right? So you've got a context diagram for your application, and maybe you've got a data flow diagram. What I will do is I will identify things like trust boundaries. I will identify things like potential misuse cases, and then I will start drawing attack trees, all the ways that I could attack this particular platform. Once I have all my attack trees, what I can do is I can then start working from the leaves back to the root and start identifying detective and preventative controls that could mitigate the risks of these attacks. These controls can become the security requirements that I need to put into my application. Similarly, I can do the same for a network. I can do the same for an ATM. Any sort of system, whether it be a machine or whether it, even if it's a natural system, you can use threat modeling to understand the risks and understand the mitigation techniques. Once you understand the mitigation techniques and you implement them, and look, we all work with limited resources, whether the limited resource is time, whether it's finance, or whether it's human resource and talent, irrespective, you need to use a risk-based approach to identify which are the controls that are imperative to your platform and what's the right level of security based on the asset's value. Once you have that, we then go into an attack simulation where you may have an attack simulation platform, or possibly you may hire the likes of Manny, or you may have like a adversary simulation platform like something like the team at Decide, would bring down to your network and perform various exercises to test these controls, both for design and implementation and operational effectiveness. And this is essentially the mechanism we use for design to build in defensive controls. And it's interesting because it actually uses the same process that Manny uses to attack systems. So we kind of use the attacker's methodology, to produce a counter effect. All of that said and done, I've got a working paper with 3 exercises where anybody who wants to take part in the blue team capture the flag, what you need to do is you need to identify 3 systems of your choosing. And what I'd like you to do is do a context diagram, identify who's the external and internal sort of interfaces, do a data flow diagram, very high level of what the system looks like. I gave you guys an example. And then design an attack tree. Attack objective, attack pattern, the actual attack. And then I want you guys to design defenses. And the best will be selected for the blue team CTF, and you guys will be sent credentials for the Snowed Guardian platform to participate in the blue team capture the flag at the Security Summit Hackathon for 2022. So guys, if you guys have any questions, now would be the time to ask me. I actually can't see any of the questions, so I might need your help. Ben, either you or Tiani, please. Guys?
Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Ben. Is that you?
Good, thanks. Yes, it's me. We're just preparing for the next speaker on this side. You can actually go to the comments section. There is some questions there, but it was obviously pointed to Tiani. But let's give it a while, and let's just see if there's any comments coming through.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah,
Thank
give
you
us.
everybody for your time. It was awesome to spend the Saturday morning with you guys. All right. Thanks, Ben. Cheers. Bye.
Cool. Thank you very much, Nathan. It was a really cool talk. So as we mentioned throughout the day, my name is Manny, and I'm the CEO at Talspace. So we're a company that does hacking. Companies hire us to bypass security controls, test security controls, things like that. And I'm going to be taking you through a little bit of a discussion around how we go about doing these type of tests, the types of red teaming, penetration testing, the differences. I'm going to touch on some of the things that Steve has said, some of the things that Nathan has said, and even some of the things that Ivan said as well. So I guess when you come as the last speaker, you get to have some overlap between the different talks. Let's just go over. Cool, so that's my introduction. Those are my contact details. I do know we are going to be added to the Sonke platform, which is the geek culture platform. So you're welcome to reach out to me there. Otherwise, that's my email address. That's my Twitter handle. You're welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions after this, or even after the hackathon. I'm always happy to help, if you need advice or guidance or anything like that. So I'm campaigning on the threat landscape. So I'd like to sort of start off with, why do we need to do all this type of stuff? What is the reason? And I've got some examples in here that might be old examples, but I still like them because they're relevant. And even though security and cybersecurity has been around for a long time, unfortunately, a lot of the things, a lot of the vulnerabilities continue to be the same, even though they just changed slightly. Then I'll touch on some red teaming and a little bit of the way forward as well. Also, if you're a hacker, besides having to wear a hoodie, which I'm not doing today because it seemed a bit hot when I left home, you have to have a cat in your presentation. So check that. I've got a cat in there. I'm going to find a funny cat for an agenda meme, but that's what you've got now. So what or who is a hacker? So I know Ivan touched on this earlier today, and he had like really good academic definitions of what a hacker is, right? So typically when you think of hackers, and because our company's slogan is hackers for hire, we always tend to get a bit of unwanted attention, I guess, because people are like, isn't hacking illegal? Aren't you like a criminal? Stuff like that. So I think there needs to be a difference between a hacker and a criminal, right? So hackers are people who think of creative ways around things. So you think a bit outside the box, you look at something and you're trying to figure out, how can I do that in a different way? And that's really what hacking is about. It doesn't necessarily have to be a technical person. You don't have to be technical to be a hacker. Anyone can be a hacker, right? So if you sit there and you're thinking of what are different ways to do something or do things, and you find creative ways to do those things, you can consider yourself a hacker. So you look at something and you think of it in a different way. Now I know typically there's a definition where people say hackers are criminals, but there's different things. A criminal is someone that does something that's criminal, like crime. Whereas a hacker, I like to always use the definition, which I got from my good friend Jason Street, who's quite well known in the industry. And he always says, like, if you have an accountant, do you consider an accountant ethical? Do you hire an accountant and say, like, I want an ethical accountant that does ethical stuff versus just an accountant? And I think it's the same thing with a hacker. You can hire a hacker. You don't necessarily have to distinguish and say, like, this is an ethical hacker. I know it's a bit of a contentious thing, but for us, hackers are people who just think about creative ways to break things, creative ways to do things, and that's what we do. You've got to love what you do. But yeah, I guess there's the stereotypical thing where we wear hoodies, and we do that at Talspace, actually. We wear hoodies, so I guess that's where the stereotype comes from. So what is an ethical hacker? If you look up hacking and hackers, you'll find out that a lot of companies they'll go and look for ethical hackers. Right? Like, as I mentioned, there's not really a difference. The ethical hacker can be a hacker, but in terms of terminology and things like that, ethical really just means you've had permission to test that application or that environment, and the company knows that you're doing that testing. So in these cases, it's always important to make sure that you have permission and that you're allowed to actually test those environments. And really, that's the difference between a hacker, an ethical hacker, and a criminal, is that you've got a permission, the organization knows that you're doing it. And of course, there's things like bug bounties where even though there's permission, bug bounties being published, there's a scope, and you need to stick to that scope. All right, so that's really what an ethical hacker is. And just remember, I think hackers, we're curious, we like to try things, and you might get I know a typical way that people usually get into hacking is by trying to hack the neighbor's Wi-Fi. That's always a classic one. Even when I interview people for like internships and things like that, I'll be like, what have you done around hacking? They'll be like, yeah, I hacked my neighbor's Wi-Fi. Like, that's illegal, number one. But I guess you're at least curious and you're trying to figure stuff out. but yeah, it is illegal. I mean, there's different ways nowadays. You can set up labs at home. You can set up, I mean, like Ivan said, geeks and hackers are pretty much alike. If you can set up stuff, you understand our technology, you can set it up and you can do it in a controlled way that's not illegal. So just remember that. So I've touched on ethics. It's really, really an important aspect of doing this the legal way within South Africa and internationally, is that to make sure that you follow the rules, you get permission. And, once you're in environments and things like that, you don't do anything dodgy, like steal money or plant a backdoor to come back later, things like that. All right, so I'm just going to cover around like how we go about doing our testing at a high level. Obviously, it's not feasible to cover everything within 1 hour. And actually, originally I had 30 minutes, and then I asked for 45 minutes, and they gave me an hour, and I believe I've got more than an hour. So that's okay. And I'm always happy to take questions. So I'm going to go at a high level and touch these the different terminologies and how we go about it. So at a high level, information gathering is pretty much identifying information on what we're targeting, be it an application, be it a platform, IP addresses, domains, people, the company itself. And you spend a lot of time gathering information. I know if you watch something like CSI Cyber, for example, they type on the keyboard and then bang, they're in. Everyone's like happy and excited. That's not really how it works. A lot of times we sit there, we get information on what we're testing, we do research on the products, the applications that we found, and it takes a really long time to get to the point where we actually start to exploit and try to gain access to an environment. So information gathering is actually the most important part of most engagements that we do, because you need to understand and spend time identifying what you're going to target and how you're going to go about targeting it. Threat modeling, I'm going to touch on as well. Nathan also touched on it. It is an important aspect, and there's different, variations of threat modeling you can do. From very, very technical to like very, very high level business process focused type threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, exploitation, and then post-exploitation. And all of our analysts' favorite part, reporting, writing that report of what you've done. I'm just joking. No one actually likes the reporting part, but that is the most important part because that's the part that the client gets. That's the part that they pay for, that they want to see, is like where the vulnerabilities, how can they fix them? So that's really at a high level. So if you look at like information gathering, there's a few tools and websites you can look at and that you can use. One of them is the OSINT framework. So if you go to the OSINT framework, osintframework.com, you'll see at the top there of the slide. You visit that site, and depending on what you're looking for, what you're trying to get information on, you click on the little bubble, the little circle, and it will expand and give you different websites, different sources you can actually look at. In terms of tools themselves, there are many, many tools out there. Probably one of the better tools we can get everything within one place is Kali Linux. So Kali is an operating system. You can download it, and you can use it for free. It's got a whole bunch of tools. That's a screenshot from the latest version. You'll see right there, number one is information gathering. If you click on information gathering, you'll find a whole bunch of tools on there. Probably like your best tool, even for this hackathon of your application, is Nmap. Or you can use Zenmap as well, which is the GUI front end for Nmap. You can actually use that to enumerate, scan your application, scan your ports, and actually identify what's there and what can be exploited, which I'll cover more on later. So those are pretty much the two sources. There are various other sources, but in terms of tools, and something I'll touch on throughout the presentation is understanding how those tools actually work is an important aspect. If you need to understand how you run these tools, because if you don't know how the tool works, it's very likely you could cause damage, number one, but also you might just not get results because you're not understanding exactly what the tool is doing. And so you might get output that doesn't make sense, and you might just overlook something that is an actual vulnerability within your application or your host, or whatever it is. So how difficult is it to find IoT devices online? So typically my presentations are more like interactive. I like to ask the crowd and audience questions. I guess I could ask the crowd here, but they are not really live. But so IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, that's stuff that's not your typical computer or server or anything like that. Just things like your light bulbs, your microwaves, phones, geysers, irrigation equipment. I mean, pretty much all these things that you could buy, IP cameras, web cameras, things like that get put online. And sometimes not always, like Steve mentioned, security, people are trying to get to market quicker than their competitor. And usually they push to market, and then it gets out there, then it's insecure, and then they get hacked, and then who they're going to call, as Steve mentioned, it's going to be you. It's going to be your reputation. It's going to be your product that's going to get impacted at the end of the day. Although they do call us sometimes as well to try and cover it up, which we don't do, obviously, because you can't just make it. Once it happens and it's out there, it's out there. All right, so how difficult is it to find insecure IoT devices? It is quite easy, actually. There's a website called Shodan, SHODAN.io is the URL. If I have time, which I believe I am going to have time, I can open up the website and show you guys exactly how you'll be able to go through Shodan and find certain things. So, for example, if you go to Shodan and you click on a button, there's a link at the top that says Explore. You get predefined results and things there. You can actually search for things like open web cameras, for example. And you connect to like a camera and you'll have a live feed into someone's business, house, things like that. Just remember, because it is published on the internet and it's open, it's typically, I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me. If you get arrested, they'll come back to you and go, but Manny from Talspace said this is legal. That's not really, but typically if it's on the internet and it's open, then it's you access it, it's open, right? If you go there to a camera and you type in credentials and you know you shouldn't have access to that web camera or that application, that's where it becomes a bit blurry and illegal. All right, so the nice thing about Shodan is it actually scans the internet and looks for certain headers in applications, ports, things like that, and you can actually go in through Shodan and actually pick it up. If you get a paid-for version, you can actually start do certain filtering, like for geolocation, certain applications or devices, and it's really, really powerful if you want to go find certain things. So, yeah, have a look. And the idea is for you to actually see how easy it is to find something that's on the internet that's insecure. And a lot of the times, people think they put something online, and the internet is big and no one can find it. But then you have sites like Shodan that are going through there and actually indexing everything, or scanning everything. In terms of indexing, it's not in my slides, but there's a website called archive.org. You can have a look at it. It's pretty cool. It used to be called the Wayback Machine. You go there and you can actually see snapshots of websites, how they were back in the day, and actually navigate to the website as if it was live today. So if you had like a vulnerability or you published something by accident onto your website and Wayback Machine or archive.org came through and archived it, it's there. There's no taking it back. Yeah, you've got a problem. So even if you're an IT admin or someone and you published it, like you deleted it the next day, you thought you got away with it, something's come through and indexed it or archived it. All right, so there's another website called incam.org or .com. I can't remember exactly, but they're basically just there's a show there. Okay. All right, let me do it. So I've been told I can use this ITWeb machine to go to these sites. I'm just saying. By Ivan, who's the CEO of ITWeb. So I do have permission. Just saying. That's right. You got to get permission every time. Can you guys see the screen? Yeah. Cool. So this is the website I was talking about, incam.org. So basically what they do is they actually go through and index or look for open cameras or live camera feeds on the internet that are open, right? So you'll see here there's like a few streams you can connect directly to. But the interesting thing is that they got different, that's a bit, I don't need to click there. They've got categorizations, so like advertisement, airline, construction, farm, things like that. But they also do it based on country. All right. So if you look for South Africa, it's not alphabetical. Is it up? There you go. So there's 59 cameras that they've got here that are open on the internet from South Africa. And you'll see it's people's houses, businesses. If you click on there, you'll probably get a live stream into there. And you can actually see exactly the location, coordinates based on the camera and the IP address. So it's still loading. But yeah, it's typically a live stream you connect to actually see exactly what's happening there. So like, why does this happen? Why is it that these devices are sitting on the internet and they're insecure? Like, why is it that this happens? So typically it is about awareness, like the users themselves. People buy cameras. And when you buy a camera or you buy any technology, unless you're an Apple user, you're typically looking at the price. So you're worried about the price and you want to buy something that's affordable but will get the job done. A lot of time these cameras, you buy them, and I've done tests myself where I've bought cameras and I've put them on my control network, and I actually see that these cameras are trying to call back to different servers across the internet. But typically, if you plug something in, it just works by magic without you having to enter any credentials or anything like that, then it's probably open on the internet and anyone can find it. So this is what happens. Again, these devices, because they're cheaper, that means they didn't really spend budget or money actually developing or integrating security into there. And I think Steve mentioned it around, you've got your $1 billion idea, you develop it. A lot of times, a lot of these companies that have great ideas come to us and they say, like, we need a penetration test. We need to, because they're trying to get, like, a bigger client is trying to get their product or they're trying to purchase it, and they say, we need a penetration test to make sure that your application is safe before we put our data on there. And typically, if you haven't designed security from the beginning into that product or to that solution, to add it back in after the fact is going to cost you a lot of money, number one, and you're going to have to rewrite a lot of your application to do it the right way. So if you don't, and you get another provider that's going to maybe just give you the checkbox test, unfortunately, it'll come back to bite you later on. All right, so that's Etycam, and you can visit it. Hopefully your camera's on there. Then Shonen.io, as I mentioned, it's pretty cool. They run deals around the Black Friday and certain deals. If you follow them on Twitter, you get like a really cheap subscription to them, which allows you to do a lot of cool things. So you click on Explore. You'll see there's like industrial control systems, databases, network infrastructure, video games, Ethereum miners. It's been a while since I've been on the Explore, but I see that's one of them. And you can actually go through there and actually look at like different tags. So let's say webcam is a popular tag. And it'll come back and say, like, these are the web cameras with no passwords. I see. So you need to like log into your search filters. But if you go through those, you'll eventually find some that don't require it. But you'll see like all these searches are based on specific manufacturers, things like that, headers within the HTTP headers, things like that, which they look for. So that's really the, like, for example, May guy on IP cameras, which I've never heard of. But those are the cameras with admin as the password. So admin is the user, and the password is admin. All right. So a lot of times, default credentials, things like that, especially if you like setting up like a server or a product or an application, if you don't change default credentials, then sites like Shonen will find it, but also criminals that are looking to do something malicious will also find it as well. Especially your home routers and things like that you might have bought but not configured securely. All right, so let me go back to the presentation. So those are the two sites. Got it. Right. I would say usually any questions, but there's no one around. But I think if Tiani, other questions.
What can happen if you're in a situation of stealing credentials instead of buying them?
What do you mean what can happen? If they steal credentials?
Yeah, if you steal credentials instead of buying them. So let's say maybe it's software.
They're saying if they steal credentials, what will happen? It's illegal, so I think. Yeah, buy credentials or steal credentials, both those things are illegal. That's the, buying password dumps, things like that's also illegal because you're actually giving your money to proceeds of crime. That's usually what the problem is. So us as a company that does pen testing, we actually have big password lists that we store based on how we crack passwords. So if I explain to you, I wasn't going to go into this, but I think I have time. But basically, in your application, when you store a password or user credentials, you have an option of storing a plain text, which means you've got to store the password as I type it in. You're storing the database plain text, which is convenient. Like as a user, if I click forgot password, you email me my password back, and that's like great. The problem is, if someone compromises your database, they've got your password. It's sitting right there, it's clear text, and that's a big problem. So we move on to things like hashing the password. So you take that password, you hash it with something not MD5, so at least SHA-256, and you get like this very long, let's call it text string, and you store that in a database, right? Now, if I hack your database and I get your database out, all I'm going to have is the usernames and this very long hash. All right, so how do I go about getting this password now, right? So I've got my list of passwords, and I apply the same hash until I get a matching hash. So let's say my password is many, and I hash it, and I get this very long string, and I find the same string in your database, and I know that password is also many, right? Because I can match them together, right? So as developers, what you can do is you can actually add what's known as a salt, all right? So I type in my password, you take my password, you add a random value to it, and then you hash that. You do not store the salt in the database, because if I compromise the database and I've got the salt, I can just do the same thing again. I take the password, the salt, hash it, and compare the two. So that's how you make it a little more difficult to guess. And obviously, the weakness there is that if you allow your users to type in weak passwords, it's going to happen that it's going to be very easy for me to guess the password. And what makes a strong password? If we can ask in the chat, what is a strong password?
There's another question I posted.
I don't see the screen. Where is it?
Which is more challenging between being a white and a black hat hacker?
What's more challenging? So the question is, what is more challenging around being a white hat hacker versus a black hat hacker? I mean, I guess as a black hat, there's no scope, so you can do whatever you like. You probably make a lot more money as a black hat hacker. But saying that, it's illegal, and you go to prison when you get caught, and you will get caught. Everyone, even the best criminals, they're the best OPSEC in the world. At some point, they're going to make a mistake, like go on holiday to a country where there's extradition and they get caught. Or someone's going to out them. Because unfortunately, criminals, sometimes there is honor, but not really. So I guess in terms of like techniques and the tools and the exploits, white hats and black hats use the same type of methodologies and tools and things like that to target companies and gain access. There are differences there as well. Because again, we as white hats, or when we have permission, we have things like scope. We can't do anything that's illegal. Like for example, I can't go and bribe the security guard at the company to try and gain access to the company. Because even with permission from the company, there's a lot of ethical issues around that. So I think that's really the main difference. But yeah, typically it's just the legalities is the main difference between the two, and whether it's legal or not illegal. All right. Are there any other? No. Cool. So back to the password one. Were there any answers there? No. No one said what makes a strong password. Okay. So
yes.
Did they?
Special characters, no numbers, plus caps, plus lowercase.
Okay. Special characters, numbers, lowercase, and uppercase, right? So those are all things that do make it stronger. But the other thing what really makes a password stronger is the length. The longer the password, the stronger it's going to be. So let me show you a website that's, again, I wasn't planning to do this, but I believe I've got a lot more time. So let me do that. There's a website called grt.com, which I've put a link in the slides. So if you get those slides, you'll be able to see it. So grt.com has got a lot of really cool services you can use. All right. So if you come here, one of them is Shields Up, which would scan the firewall or the gateway of this current internet connection, which is not my internet connection, so I won't be doing that. And one of the other things is actually password haystacks, right? So password haystacks is basically like an estimation of how difficult or how easy it will be to actually crack a password. All right. So who wants to give me their password so we can just type it in here? Tiani. No one. All right. So if I type in the password, right, you'll see here that it's 8 lowercase. It says the search space depth. So it's 26 because of the alphabet. That tells you exactly how, like online attack, it will take 6.91 years to guess this password, right? So online attack means I sit there and I send a request to your web application one by one until I get it. But I mean like a really stupid guess. Like I'll try A, and then I'll try AB, then I'll try ABC. And then like that's how long it's going to take for me to guess that password. Obviously, as I mentioned, like as a company like Talspace, we have a password list that we kept over the years, and I can guarantee you the word password is in that list. So an offline password attack, that means I've got the database of hashes and I can crack it. That will take me 2 seconds. And a massive cracking array scenario is 0.00217 seconds. Obviously, as geeks and as hackers, you should go to this website and just type in your password because you don't know where it's going. Probably half the stream has already done that. But I'm joking. I've checked it out. It doesn't leave the web page itself. So it's all JavaScript. It's all client side. The last time I checked. Obviously, if you're worried about that, just kill your internet connection, type it in here, and you'll see it will actually do it for you without requiring internet connection. So let's do what the person suggested on the chat, right? So they said uppercase, special character, and a number. That looks pretty cool. So it does go up definitely, 2.43 months and 1.77 hours. If I had to have like a really massive amount of GPUs or computing power, I'll be able to crack it quite a lot quicker. So you'll see as you add those things, it does become more secure. So let's say it was 2.43 months. Let's say I use like a password phrase, like the best password ever. I just add in the special character like that. If you just based on the length, because it's got longer, and 2 special characters, even if I take out the special characters completely, you'll see it takes a lot longer just based on the length of the password. You know, I know I spelled ever wrong, in case I want to correctly. So the idea is that the longer the password, the more difficult it is to actually guess that password. And this is just, let's say, dumb brute forcing. You know, like I mentioned, if you've done this for a very long time, you've got password lists, you'll actually take educated guesses as opposed to just trying to brute force it like that. But yeah, that's really the idea of the password, and really important to ensure that your applications enforce strong passwords and they don't store things in clear text. Otherwise, it'll be possible to actually guess the password, even your admin password and things like that. All right, so in terms of the Internet of Things, or as I've called it, the Internet of Secure Things on the slide. As I mentioned, there's a lot of devices out there that get sold. They're very cool. You know, as geeks, people like to play with these things. You know, you like to buy technology, you like to try and play with it, see what you can do. You like to make your home smart. Again, just be very careful about what sort of technology you get, and make sure that it's secure. And I already went through showed it, so we've covered that. I've gone the wrong way. On my keyboard. All right, so usually when I do these type of presentations in person, I like to sit in the room and actually collect Wi-Fi probes. So for those who don't know, your phone itself, if you leave home, for example, you have Wi-Fi at home and you're walking on the street, but you've disconnected from your Wi-Fi network, your phone is continuously asking, where's this Wi-Fi network? Where's this Wi-Fi network? And it's broadcasting your actual Wi-Fi network name across the air, really. So if I sit there with my machine or my Raspberry Pi, whatever it is that I've created, and I intercept those Wi-Fi probes, I can actually identify what networks you connect to and the names of those networks. All right, so why is that a risk? Let's see if someone's got an idea in the chat. I can't see the chat.
Just click on comments on your left-hand screen.
On left-hand screen.
There's a comments bar.
The PowerPoint thing is showing you, not the... Oh, yeah.
Private chat. Okay. So the comments ain't there.
Yeah, comments on share.
Okay.
That's cool. You guys can give me the comments.
Okay, so you can go to the live stream.
Yeah, open YouTube.
Oh, you want me to open up YouTube? Okay.
Yeah. And we can just mute that.
Just look for ITweb there. See, the audio guys are hackers, as you can see. They just told me to like visit the YouTube stream and just mute it. That's a hack, guys. Well done. That's actually a workaround to get the comments. That's very good. Like I said, everyone's a hacker. You can be a hacker. You don't have to be super technical. Okay, so now I've got the comments as well, which is cool. I'm also logged in as Ben, so that's great. So I can make comments and be Ben for the day. All right, so yeah, so the Wi-Fi probes that you get to collect via the air, for example, what I can do as an attacker or as a hacker, if I've got permission, is I can actually set up an access point, a Wi-Fi network with the same name as your Wi-Fi network at home. And your device will try to connect to that Wi-Fi network. It will obviously ask you to enter the password. All right, so you might be like, why's my Wi-Fi network at home asking me for a password? But like you might just type it in. And I'll have the password as well. Besides that, there's a website called wiggle.net. For those guys back in the day, we used to do a thing called wall driving. So wall driving was when you drove around, you look for Wi-Fi networks that might be open or closed, and you'd mark it with chalk on the pavement. There was no smartphones and laptops back then. You'd be like, this is an open network, this is a closed network, for example. Now there's a website, and you can store that on your phone or your laptop. You drive around, and it actually collects the Wi-Fi probes, not the Wi-Fi probes, the Wi-Fi networks, like the SSIDs, and it actually maps it onto a map for you. Right, so if you go to like wiggle.net, and you can go in here, you can actually search for like your SSID. I think there's a filter here as well. So like SSID is actually your Wi-Fi network name. So you can search for it there, or you can search for your address. And pretty much wherever there's like these purple dots, that's Wi-Fi networks that have been picked up. So if you actually, let's look for around IT web, what can we find here? Oh, you guys not on the, is 1, 2, 3 Ravonia? I can't remember. Oh, thanks, guys, that's helpful. Ravonia Boulevard, no, that's not England. I thought it was in England, Edinburgh, yeah, that's fine. See, all these dots are pretty much Wi-Fi networks that have been picked up by someone that had Wiggle on their devices, or they drove past. It's not rendering. So I mean, there's nothing you could do. Even if you hide your network name, it's not rendering. Even if you hide your network name, it doesn't matter. So that's really a security through obscurity type control, which I can't really see it. I've got to click. But usually when it's like a dot, it means that there's a Wi-Fi network that got picked up. So based on that, if you have a really unique Wi-Fi name, and I come into here and I look for it, I can pretty much find out where you live, for example, or where you've gone, or where you've been, things like that. If we do certain engagements where we're targeting people and you want to get to, for example, we're targeting an organization, and we want to see like where do people go for coffee, for example, because you want to sit there and try to set up a fake access point or an evil twin for the company's network name, and you want to do it outside, and the device will connect, the company device will connect to that, and you'll be able to actually get some information. So, a lot of the times when we do our assessments, it becomes very difficult you need to make sure that you don't compromise personal devices of the client versus work devices. So I guess one of the questions earlier was around the difference between black hat and white hat, right? Is that in that case, we wouldn't be able to actually target a personal device, whereas a criminal would just do it because they don't really have those type of ethics. They'll just go straight for the device without having a second thought. Right, there's also Bluetooth, which is also, depending on your phone and what sort of manufacturer you use, there might be different vulnerabilities that exist. You can look up Blueboard. So Blueboard was a Bluetooth vulnerability that came out a few years ago. But you'll still find it in certain companies and certain clients where, like the TVs, for example, certain devices still have that vulnerability, which pretty much meant that anyone within the same vicinity of that network would be able to actually compromise that device via Bluetooth and take control of that device. And the thing is that it was wormable. So wormable means that it can spread from device to device, depending on how you've implemented that. All right, so I see there's a question here. I assume that as a hacker, if I can get to the information to the Wi-Fi you're looking for, I can figure out your ISP. Yeah, you could. I mean, you could figure it out based on the Wi-Fi network name, but it does depend as well, what you found within that probe itself. So I guess to find out the ISP itself, you'd have to get some sort of connection from the client to you, and based on that IP address, you might be able to figure out which ISP they're using. Although typically the ISP is out of scope. We're talking about being ethical here. All right, so what's the difference between penetration testing and red teaming? So a penetration test is typically very narrow in terms of scope. So you're focusing on a specific application, a specific network. It's very narrow, right? So that's pretty much what penetration test is. And you do different types. You do mobile app pen tests, web applications, network, infrastructure, that type of stuff, which is usually quite focused and tightly scoped. Whereas a red team or red teaming is where the entire organization is within scope and you have certain objectives. So, for example, a bank would hire us to steal money from the bank, and in that case, everything's in scope. All the branches, all the businesses, all the subsidiaries, whatever it is that's part of that organization will be within scope, which means we can go and target anyone. Again, just keep it within the legalities or within the legal system. You can target anyone within the organization, and you can try and achieve that objective, which is to steal money from the bank or extract information, gain access to the critical applications, whatever it is. And the nice thing about the red team is that it's typically a lot more exciting in terms of like what you can use, in terms of your methodology. So, for example, if I give you an application as a penetration tester, let's say test the application, it's going to take you, all you can do is test that application. Things like social engineering, phishing, smishing, which is like creating fake SMSs or fake phone calls, things like that will all be out of scope because you need to actually just stick to the scope, which is the pen test. So that's really the main differences between the two. For example, if you had to think of the CTF that we're doing for the hackathon, think about it like an penetration test. Right? We're going to be giving you guys a number of IP addresses, and we're going to tell you need to target these IP addresses, and you have to get the flags on those IP addresses. I think Nathan might have covered what was involved in the CTF, and that's when I arrived here, so I actually stopped streaming when I was coming to the building. So I think that's pretty the main differences between the two. Obviously, if you think of blue teaming or the blue team side of things, they're there to sort of block all their access and stop us from actually getting into the organization or compromising the application. So threat modeling, Nathan did cover it already. And that's also a very important part of the penetration test or red team. If you've actually got it, collected all the information on the applications, the organization, the people, things like that, the next step really is to come up with your attack path. How you're going to go about trying to compromise this organization or this application. Again, depending on scope, it's very important to factor in the technology, not just the technology, but also the people and the process side of things. All right. So there's been a lot of focus, like on, especially if you a geek and you do hackathons, you focus a lot on the technology side of things. You build in applications that need to work, you need to solve a problem, it needs to be innovative, all that stuff. It's very technology focused. But other times it's a logic error in the process between the application's flow that we might pick up a vulnerability that can be used to target the application or to gain access to data. And then if you're looking at like red teams and things like that, the people aspect is usually the part that we would usually get access to the organization through. But I think depending on the maturity of the organization, obviously. But it's very, very important. Usually I ask like, where's the biggest weakness? Is it people, process, or technology? People always say like, yeah, it's the people. The people are the biggest weakness, but not really, because the people are actually without people, there's organizations, there's applications, there's no security really. So you need to actually make sure that there's a combination of all three. You need to look at all three. You can't just. I know there was a joke earlier about how Steve is been around since before we were born, which might be true. But I think for me, this people process technology thing as well, people keep saying like, yeah, it's a very old thing. People process technology is an outdated way to think about stuff. But I still believe that if you break down anything, you can pretty much break it down to people processing technology. If you look at those vulnerabilities around those things and how security can be integrated into that whole process, you'll be able to find a lot better maturity coming out of that. There's an example there around a process flow. So pretty much what you need to do as part of your applications when you're busy building this application for the hackathon is looking at the actual process between the application, the different users and actors within your application, how they interact with the application or the platform and how that information flows, and looking for vulnerabilities and threats within those flows is a really important aspect. So if you look at the threat landscape, there's really two aspects to it. There's the threat and then the actual threat actor. You can't really get rid of any of these. They're going to be around you can't just get rid of the threat actor, take them out, or, they're always going to be there. So you can't get rid of them. So you need to factor, every time you do threat modeling, you need to look at the threat actor and what threats actually exist out there that could be used to compromise your application, or your platform, or your organization. So if you look at cybersecurity, there's 189 million rand lost because of hacking and criminals. 130,000 users affected. That's really a lot of users if you think about it. It's also a lot of money, but also 60% of stats are made up, just like I made up that slide. It's not really that. Someone should not quote this into one of their reports, later on and be like, Talspace said 189 million rand was lost to cybercrime, but that's already true. And the reason why I put this on the slide is that, I think there's a lot of stats out there. You can look them up and you can, get scared, I guess, with the stats. But I think that what's really important to understand is the context. Actually, you said 62% of my slides. I guess it is totally made up. So the context is important, right? Your threat landscape and your threats that affect your application or your organization or you personally is actually based on the context. It's very important to understand your specific context. For example, this person here, maybe watermelons falling from the sky or the ceiling onto them is like a very big threat. So the rest of us, when we don't have watermelons in the ceiling, it's actually not a threat. So I think when you look at your application or you're looking at your actual threat model, context is the number one most important thing that you need to factor into your threat modeling. Don't, for example, don't go Google how to secure an application and then try to apply anything randomly to your application. It's going to work. You need to understand your application, understand your threat model. And that's really an important aspect. So I will ask you a question. I'm going to flash a slide in front of you. I'm going to watch the chat and see. You must tell me, is this a male or a female that you see? I know it's a binary thing that I'm doing now, but for the slide, we're going to focus on two genders here, male or female, or whatever they associate with, I guess. So you can just tell me, I'm going to flash it on, then flash it off. Was that a male or a female that you saw? I'll wait a little bit on the chat and see if someone comes back. Is someone typing? No. In the room, did you guys see a male or female? Female? Male? Okay. Okay, ITWeb said male. All right. Male, yes. All right. The truth is, it's actually just the word liar. If you look at it at an angle like slanted down like this, you'll see it says the word liar. All right. And that's really what social engineering is. So social engineering is you do a pretext and you want to lead someone down the path you want them to go down. All right. And that's really what the social engineering is all about. So I think if I didn't put the slide there, say male or female, and I put this here and I said, what do you see on the slide? Maybe some of you would have seen the word liar. Maybe some of you would have seen something else. And that's really what social engineering is about. So I'll give you an example. If you get targeted by an email that says you've inherited millions of dollars from a Nigerian prince, whatever it is, and you get this email, you have to click here to claim your prize or your inheritance, you probably won't fall for it. Okay, I hope you won't fall for it. But if you get like an email that says very specifically, like let's say after today, you get an email that says, hello, Ideathon participant. Thank you for participating in the Ideathon today. We're making vouchers available for free airtime or data to be used to prepare for the hackathon. Please click here to claim your voucher. You might click on that link because it's got all the stuff that will make you believe that it's an actual valid email. So I hope Tiani wasn't planning to send out an email about data and vouchers because I just messed that up for you. All right, that's fine. Yeah, so that's really what social engineering is about. And I think if you look at applications or your processes around your applications, always factor in the fact that social engineering could happen. And I think Steve mentioned in his presentation, looking at like what's the worst case that could happen. Like a lot of times with clients and they say like, but why would they do that? Why would they do that? Like, well, criminals are criminals. They've got different motivations. And you can never really truly understand the criminal's motivation because you're not a criminal. But they're motivated by different things. So like the question is always like, why would they do that? But you need to really think about the worst case. What is going to happen? What could be done? Around that. Social engineering is one of those aspects. If your application is really, really secure, as an analyst or as a pen tester, I want to target something else, your people or your processes. And you need to factor that in as well into your threat model. So which do you trust more? Speaking to or hearing from your boss or your friend or your colleague, an email or an SMS? Which one do you trust more? I'm just going to wait for chat and see if someone tells me what they trust more. Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I noticed. Okay, cool. All right, cool.
Does the email have TLS?
I'd rather be speaking to audio from us.
All right, so guys in the Ruby are telling me that they'll trust more speaking to or hearing from their boss instead of an email or an SMS. I think usually that's the case. Someone talk. Well, nowadays I don't think many people like to talk on the phone. They'd rather text or send a message or picture actually, or meme. So usually speak to your boss. But the truth is, all these things can be spoofed or faked. So there are different applications or apps that you can use. In South Africa, it used to be quite, at least back in the day, you could easily spoof a number. So I could call someone and make it look like it's someone else calling. And then I could add like background noise or something like that. So you can have a look at these apps. They're actually available. They're commercial apps. You pay for them. And you can actually use them to try these things out. But the thing is that it's really, you can't really trust anything at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. Because all these things, SMSs, emails, voices, even your images or your videos can be faked. I mean, the reason why that picture there is, or those pictures of Obama are there is because of deep fakes. I think we've all seen like versions of deep fakes where you can take like your face on an app and you can put it onto like a celebrity dancing around or in a song, things like that. But you can really take, videos of people and audio of people and create actual deep fakes where you can animate the face and change what they're saying completely. And we've done some of these as part of some of our engagements for some clients. We've actually done that. We've taken video recording of like execs or certain people within the company that have very public profile and actually created like a fake video of them saying completely random stuff or something that would be damaging to the company had it actually been released. So all these things can be faked. There's different technologies you can use to create things like deep fakes. Audacity, Wave to Lip, OpenShot Video Editor. These are open source tools that you can use to create deep fakes. Your mileage may vary. It does depend also on your machine and having GPU and getting your drivers to work as well. But there are also commercial tools available that can help you do that quite a lot easier. But deep fakes, faking voices, SMSs, emails, all those other things are entirely possible to be done. I think there was Kendrick Lamar. Okay, I see. There was one question around, I'm still a beginner. How do I get in-depth knowledge on hacking? So we hear this quite a lot. We also, at Talkspace, we run boot camps and internships. And really, you need to start from the basics and build up on your knowledge. So if I had to give any advice to anyone that wants to be a really, really good hacker or pen tester or security analyst, you need to understand the fundamentals first. Like I 100% understand operating systems, protocols, and how they actually work. You'll see that later on. I'll talk about tools and things like that. You can download tools and you can run tools. And to be honest, you can probably have a somewhat successful career in certain industries and companies where you can just run the tools and able to use the tools to get you the results. But if you really want to have an in-depth knowledge, you have to just love the industry and hacking. If you love learning new things, you love trying new things, then this is becoming a hacker is really something that you can look into because you're always learning, continuously learning. It never stops. It's something that's both a curse and like a really awesome thing because you have to keep learning, but if you really love it, and you're passionate about it, and you want to learn more about it, it's a really, really cool thing to get into. But I think, if anyone wants to structured advice, you're always welcome to reach out to myself or anyone at Talkspace, because we're always happy to provide guidance on where to start and where you can actually build on from, because everyone has a different foundation, a different knowledge, different background. And so, you always need someone to guide you in the right direction, because if you Google how to become a pen tester or how to become a hacker, you'll get so much information, you just wonder where to start. You just start somewhere and sort of have like a plan that you can build on. But it does take quite a lot of work and you have to work towards it. So, but we're happy to help and provide that input and guidance And a lot of people are as well. It's not about slides, but there's a Discord channel called Hack South. I don't know if maybe Geek Culture, someone could just tweet it out and just tag Hack South. It's a Discord channel you can join. I'm on there. A lot of other vendors in South Africa are on there, and we're happy to share and help people who want to get into the industry to actually guide you and help you in the right direction or right path. Otherwise, you can reach out to me, like I mentioned earlier, on Twitter, whatever it is, and I'll point you in the right direction. But it's really fun. I mean, imagine getting paid just to break stuff the whole day and hack into stuff. I mean, so we get to wear T-shirts and stuff and hoodies. It's really cool. Yes. All right, so threat actors. As I mentioned, you can't really get rid of them. There's various threat actors. We've got the script kiddie on the left. That's the guy that thinks they open up command prompts and they tell everyone that they're a hacker. Script kiddies, I think we've all started as script kiddies, to be honest. Even I have. I know some people out there will say that they're really hardcore and they started by writing assembler. No, they didn't. They were playing around with stuff and they were script kiddies. So, and I think it's very, very dangerous. If you're a script kiddie and you're running tools against applications or platforms, things like that, you don't know what you're doing. You can cause a lot of damage. So that's a script kiddie. Organized crime, hacktivists. Organized crime, really, it's just about 9 to 5 jobs. Criminals have 9 to 5 jobs. They've got buildings, they've got salaries, performance evaluations, medical. Literally, it's like a company, man. You go there and you work, and it's your job to just do criminal stuff. I mean, it's out there. So it's organized crime, and they're really, really good at what they do, which is stealing information, espionage, whatever the goal is of that. And especially ransomware has really driven organized crime to another level, let's be honest. Hacktivists, that's people that are driven by a different ideology. So they want to get behind a certain, let's say, like a cause or something, they feel like someone's been unfairly treated, and they'll go and get together and do something, either leak information or cause a denial of service, whatever it is, they'll get around that. And then you've got your state-sponsored, like your nation states. So, for example, if the NSA or the CIA from America decides to target me, they're going to get a way in. They'll find a way in. They'll get into my network, they'll get into my devices, and they'll get in because they've got all the money, they've got all the resources, they've got all the skills. And I mean, they do stuff like they'll intercept a brand new laptop that's been delivered to a target. They'll take the laptop, take it out, and put a hardware implant on the laptop, repackage it, and you get a brand new laptop with a hardware implant, for example. And I think, if you want to understand how a computer is structured and how this software stack works, right? You've got your applications, operating system, hardware. The closer you get to the hardware, the more privilege you have on that computer. Everything else sitting on top has to go through those layers to get to the bottom. That's why we have things like drivers and kernel mode drivers and things like that to be able to communicate between the stack. So if someone comes in and put a hardware implant on your machine, it doesn't matter what antivirus, what technology you have on top, the chance of you picking that up is going to be very, very, very minimal. And if you actually read up on firmware and things like that, how firmware is getting compromised, again, it's a very easy way to get targeted and compromised. So those are your threat actors. There are other ones as well. These are just the main categories. So if you had to look at this list of threat actors, and I'm going to look at the chat now, which one would you say is the most dangerous threat actor on this list? I'm just going to wait a bit. I believe there's a 10-second delay between me and the stream. So if you had to look at these threat actors, what is the most dangerous threat actor to a company? If you had to look at it very carefully and see. No one? Okay.
Employees.
The employees. Yeah, so usually the employees, because they've got insider knowledge, they understand the environment, they understand the applications, they can be paid off to plant a device, they can become disgruntled, but also they can make mistakes. I mean, sometimes an employee takes a database of client information and accidentally emails it out, and then that's a property violation to someone else that shouldn't have got it. So the different threat actors, it's also important to look again, like I mentioned earlier, look at your application and try to understand which is the threat actor that's most relevant to your application. Because I mean, if you're dealing with like defense systems and you're trying to build something for like defense and like, the military, your threat actor becomes a state actor. Now you need to start thinking about how you protect against that. And that comes back to your threat modeling and trying to think about it. So probably one of the big ones as well that we've come across, and it's probably happening in the industry, is third parties as well, your suppliers and your contractors. I think because of the ecosystem and how everything works nowadays, it's even for software devs. I mean, a lot of times we take libraries from like Git, or you take them from what's that site now? I used to do a lot of dev work. Stack Overflow. That's it. You go there, you copy paste some code, you put in your code, it works. You're like, yeah, and you move on. And that's basically importing some library from somewhere. Like, do you know if that library is actually secure, or is it doing something dodgy? So I think third parties contractor, your supply chain as well is also probably one of the biggest risks. And as someone mentioned in the chat there, I think they also said past employees as well. So I see there's a question there around what is a man-in-the-middle attack? So we call it a person-in-the-middle attack now, not a man-in-the-middle attack. Yes, we need to be inclusive even in our terminology. So basically what a person-in-the-middle attack is, or commonly known as a man-in-the-middle attack is, it's when you get in between like a client, an application, or a server, right? You start to set the traffic between the two. And that comes in various forms. It depends on where you targeted, how you targeted it. But basically, you get it in between and you intercepted the traffic, and you either modify that traffic or replay that traffic. That's essentially what that attack is. So I hope I answered your question. So the threat actors, as I mentioned, the script kiddies, there are a lot of tools out there that you can download and use. I mentioned Kali Linux earlier. That's got a whole bunch of hacking tools in there. You can pretty much just literally go through the menu, click on the menus, and launch the tools and use them. One of those tools is the Social Engineering Toolkit, which is a really cool way to create phishing sites, things like that. And you'll see, like, if you go in there, there's like a menu. It's through the terminal. They've got cool ASCII art, which is always a requirement nowadays. And you can read up on it, and you can actually set up like phishing sites. You can even set up like malicious documents that have like malware stuff embedded in it that you can use for like different, again, tests within your lab or your environment. Don't email like some dodgy attachment to your sister, your brother, or your mom on your home network. And I guess you can if it's your home network and you have permission, but don't. There's some other tools available out there. So if you look there in Kali, I think it's still part of Kali. I'm not entirely sure. We don't really use Arbitage, but Arbitage is pretty much like a graphical user interface front end for a whole bunch of tools that you can use individually, but it makes it really, how they advertise it is fast and easy hacking. So you go on the network, you scan the network, and you get back what you see on the right there, a whole bunch of machines and what they're vulnerable to. And you can literally just right click on there and say attack, and it will do it for you automatically. But as I mentioned, if you want to be like really, really good at this, you want to understand what you're doing, don't use Arbitage, basically. I mean, unless you understand exactly what the exploit is doing, you understand the flags, how you've configured it. I would typically recommend that you understand how to use the tools individually and how to manually before you use something that's automated for you. But for a lab environment, it's a really fun thing to play with. It's if you want to get like a feeling of like what it feels like to get a shell or compromise a host or machine within your lab environment where you have permission, it's a really nice thing to play with and learn about things. I think for like the hackathon and your application, if you set up like your website or whatever application you're going to create, you can use tools like Arbitage and stuff to scan your host and see like if there's anything vulnerable there. I don't think we've really spoken about what the end, how we'll judge security at the end, but really we're going to look at things that you've actually considered, for your application or your platform. Have you actually considered people-person technology type threats? Have you done scans? Can we see those scans? What did you do to fix them? Are they actually a risk to your application? Remember the context that I mentioned is quite important, because a lot of vulnerability scanners will give you back results that are not actual, legit. They're called false positives, which means that it's not actually a vulnerability that can be exploited. And so I'll talk more about that later as well. And there are other commercial frameworks like Cobalt Strike, that you can buy and use. But again, all these things are very nice to have. They make it very easy to do the hacking. But if you're a beginner and you're getting into this industry, I really, really recommend that you spend time understanding how all the tools work, how it's actually done, why it's able to do what it does. Otherwise, you're not going to be a great hacker, which I think we all want to be at the end of the day. And also, it's very dangerous to run tools that you don't understand what they do, because you can really break stuff and cause a lot of damage. I think the architecture has an option that's like called the Hail Mary. You like right click, and it's like you have no. You're like, let's say, like you can't find it. It basically throws everything in the kitchen sink at this network and like tries to exploit everything. You know, and, that's not a great way to do a pen test at a client or like any environment that's could be affected or taken down. You know, so yeah, spend some time, understand how the tools work, understand what they do and how they do it. I think it'll be a lot easier, especially if the tool stops working. You know how you'll be able to still be able to test or know what you're doing. All right, there are other cool tech that you can buy. So the cool companies, Hack5 sells a lot of hacking type equipment. You know, like the rubber ducky and things like that. So we can like put like payloads on a USB stick. You plug it into a machine. You flip a switch. It goes green. You turn it back, take it out, and you've got password hashes or data, whatever it is that you configure that the rubber ducky to do. There's also other things like devices you can plug into screens behind. So, for example, like if you go to a company, they've got like an HDMI screen, you take that, you plug it into, I think it's called the OWL. You plug it into there, and then you can actually connect to the screen and see what's happening on the screen from outside. You know, again, like I mentioned, if you look at computer security and things like that, that computer will not know what's going on because all you do is intercepting the signal between the screen and the computer. So you're not going to be able to pick up anything on your computer unless you look behind your computer and see like what's actually plugged in there. I mean, for some of our red team engagements, we actually build these little Raspberry Pis. So a lot of companies have what's called network access control, which means that we can't go in there and plug in any device into a network because that device it's not a company device, which means you can't connect to the network. It gets blocked. There's different ways they can block it. The most ineffective way is using a MAC address because you can change your MAC address. So the other ways is to actually validate the endpoints through certain checks. So what we do is we take a Raspberry Pi, 2 network points, plug the machine into one port of the Pi, plug the Pi to the network point, and then we've got a pretty much an inline interception of what's going on between the endpoint and the network. And that's how we bypass. A lot of times, you go to companies that got desktop machines, you plot the Raspberry Pi into the cabling duct, let's call it, and no one will ever see it that it's there. You know, we sit there, no one will be none the wiser. You know, I think when I used to work for a corporate, I was the only guy that used to like go to my desktop machine and actually unplug the cables, look behind, and everyone still was wondering what I'm doing. You know, my desktop machine, the box used to sit on my table. It was never under my desk because I wanted to see when I came to the office what was actually plugged into it. So again, the thing is, if you can plug something directly into a machine and you get in there, you're not going to be able to pick it up unless you see the actual implant behind the machine. But a lot of users wouldn't check for that. Again, if a company is really, really big, you can't really afford to hire someone to go and check every single computer within the network. It's just not a feasible thing. So yeah, yes, HackerRF is also a pretty cool one. I see it was mentioned in the comments for sure. All right, so talking about threats, this is a very old one, but the reason why I included it is because I want everyone to think about, because a lot of the times we focus on input into the application through like input boxes, you know, like username, password, and we look for things like SQL injection, you know, cross-site scripting. We look for all these attacks that are via inputs, via strings. But that's not always necessarily the only way you can actually compromise an application. You can compromise it through any input. And I think as a developer, you need to just not trust any single input that comes into your application. You just mustn't trust it, you know. So I'm sure you're all familiar with some of these media players, VLC, Popcorn Time, Strumio, Kodi. I think some people use Kodi for the wrong reasons, like streaming illegal content. So I've heard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a video. I think he's going to pay for me there. which pretty much demonstrates what would be possible. But before you play the video, actually, I just want to explain the attack. All right. So the way this works is all these media players have a way to load subtitles. So like if you're watching a movie that's not in English or your preferred language, you can download subtitles. And the way these media players worked is that they would, you can select, like, let's say I want to download the English subtitles for Frozen. I've got kids, so this is something that's so so you select the English subtitles. The media players will then go to a subtitles like server, and it'll pull the highest ranked subtitles file, like it's a text file with just like pretty much indicates like how far at which point should they actually display that subtitle, So it goes to the server, pulls the subtitles file, loads it into the media player, and then just starts to process the file in the media player as the movie is played, right? What they found, I think it was Checkpoint, the researchers, what they found is that, number one, you can submit these subtitle files to the server, this open source, it's a free subtitle, I think it's called Open Subtitles, if I remember correctly. But you can actually upload the subtitles file, and if it's the highest ranked one, anytime someone pulls or selects the English subtitles for that movie, your subtitles file gets pulled into the media player, and then it gets rendered. All right. So they also found that it was possible to manipulate the ranking algorithm on the server, which means that they could upload their subtitles file, manipulate the ranking algorithm so that their subtitles file becomes the number one. And then anytime someone chooses English subtitles, that gets pulled into the media player, rendered, and plays. All right. And yeah, let's do the movie now. I think that's the context that I needed to add. We're going to play here, Ben. Cool. There will just be some trust at some point. All right, so as I mentioned, if you're hacking, you must have a cat, so you can see I wasn't making this stuff up. All right, so they open up the popcorn time. They've chosen Frozen. They say watch. And then they're going to load the subtitles. So they're going to load the English subtitles file. And then obviously, it's not going to show that on the screen of the victim, say malicious subtitles loaded or exploited in 3, 2, 1. Okay, make it just to pause there. Pause. Okay, cool. So, did you pause? Yeah, okay. Oh, you didn't pause. Oh, you can't pause. Okay, anyway, it's fine.
You can go to your slide, actually.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so what I want to do is I'm going to pause it over here. We don't really need the sound in any case. So basically what happened here is that the victim, so the media player actually imported the subtitles file, processed it, and then based on that and how the media player was processing the input file, the researchers managed to actually get code execution on the application. So they took control of the application, and then they were able to actually create a reverse shell. So they were connected back to their machine. So on the right there, you'll see they're running Kali Linux, like I mentioned. And they're just waiting for a connection back for a reverse shell. And so once it connects back, you'll see that they actually have full control now over that victim with whatever privileges the victim has on that machine, which typically, if you're a home user, you have full admin rights on your machine. That's typically the setup. And so based on that, they've got full control now over the, let's play it again. We just play. So you'll see what they actually did is they just started a, pretty much like a remote session. Think about like remote desktop, but via tight VNC onto the victim. So they're able to actually see everything that's on the screen and have full control over it. They can turn on the web camera, turn on the keylogger, read files, copy files off the machine. And all of this just from the fact that the user just chose to load some subtitle files into the media player that was vulnerable. So the next time your VRC prompts and says, do you want to update, you to definitely click yes on that, just to keep updating your stuff, because stuff like this just goes unseen. I think I'm sure you've all noticed that Windows 10 and a lot of the applications are automatically updated. They don't ask you anymore as the user, do you want to update? They just force you. Because a lot of times these things would come out and then no one would update their software. So I think something else to factor into your development as a developer, or as someone's going to launch an application, is how quickly can you actually push an update to your application, to fix something that might be broken. Because a lot of the times that's usually a problem as well. All right, so it comes back to architecture, which is also an important aspect that we factor into the judging, is how have you actually architected your solution. That's something to factor into there as well, not just the usual stuff around software engineering, but also around security. All right, Dolphin was an attack. So I don't know who uses those what do you call them, assistants on your phones, like Siri or Google, where you can say like, hey Siri. No one's got an iPhone in this room. But basically, the phone will respond and then take instructions from you based on what you say. So with the Dolphin attack, what they found, it's also quite an old one, but something I want to highlight is that basically with the Dolphin attack, they found that devices were hearing or listening on a lower frequency than your human ear could listen or hear, right? So they were able to set commands at a lower frequency that your phone would pick up, but you wouldn't hear those commands because you just couldn't, because the software allowed the input to be at a lower frequency than the human ear could even hear. And based on that, they were able to actually start to send commands and things to the phones or devices without people actually hearing those commands. So again, it was an input that came into the application, and then no one thought about, hey, what if the frequency is lower than what the human ear can hear? That's something that wasn't factored into the threat model. So everything, let's always think about any way that someone can use your application or change your application, even through headers, through your application headers, HTTP headers, things like that, how you process them. If you're redirecting it, you're putting stuff into a script, you're reading stuff from a file, just think about carefully about how that can be abused by an attacker. If you're doing object serialization, where you're serializing objects across the network, and you deserialize that object on the other side, is it possible as an attack for me to take control of that or exploit that to get access to something? So there's a man in the disk attack, which is probably should call the person in the disk attack, I guess. But basically, this was what was called back, it was like a few years ago. This is like for your mobile application. What these mobile apps were doing was they were pulling updates from a server, putting it onto the SD card, and then they would read the update from the SD card and then update the application that way. Obviously, if an attacker's on the phone and they get access to the SD card, they can overwrite the updates and take control of the application. And because usually the SD card on your Android device, this was an Android thing, is not protected. So if you're developing a mobile app and you write it to external storage, there's a risk that someone could read that, another app, or they could overwrite it or cause something else to go wrong. So that's really what that was discussed there. There's also one, I know you might not believe it, but faxes are still used at some companies. People still use fax. We know this because we work in the corporate areas. So basically what this was that they found that even the fax machines are still being used, they're actually connected to internal networks now. All right, so they found that by sending a fax in a certain way, like certain characters on a fax paper, the way the fax machine interprets that fax as it's coming through can actually result in you getting command execution on the fax machine itself and actually compromising the fax machine. So imagine you send a fax to a fax machine and now you get a reverse connection out of the network because of the way the fax machine is rendering or pretty much printing that message. So you'll see that there's the PSTN network, which is your phone network, and then it goes out. You can get control of or get access to the internal network via Ethernet. So again, think about how you process information. Think about how you process inputs, because all these things can result in your application or environment getting compromised. All right, Stride. I'm not going to touch too much on. I know Ethan also had a few things around Stride. If you want to think about the threats to your applications or to your platforms, break it down according to this. Look at your flows and say, how is it possible for me to spoof something, within this application or within this flow? Like, is it possible for someone to come to the application and spoof a header or spoof an email address, and will they be able to gain access to the application through that way? Can they tamper with the data that's been sent between the application or between the client and the server? Repudiation is an important one. So, if I do something on an application, can it be tracked directly back to me as the person that did that action? Or can I just say, like, it wasn't me, it was Tiani that's actually manipulated the application, not me. So repudiation is an important aspect. You need to make sure that you actually, whatever users do on your application, you can actually make them accountable, trace it back to them. So there's a lot of examples around there. Information disclosure, leaking citizens information, denial of service, and then elevation of privilege. So a lot of times it comes to like logic flow. Like let's say I log in as Manny, and I'm just a normal user on the application, and then let's say Ivan is the administrative user, and then I'm able to actually access administrative parts of the application with my account because I've been authenticated, but I'm not necessarily authorized to access those sections. But all your application does is look to see, am I actually authenticated? And then based on that, you let me actually access parts of the application that I shouldn't have access to, but I have. So that's what mentioned zero trust. I don't really want to get that. Zero trust is like something we could talk about for like hours. But basically, what you can say there is that you must always make sure that if someone accesses a part of your application or data, they're authenticated and they're authorized to access that information. And it's important to make sure that both of those things are done. Otherwise, you're going to find problems within your application. All right, so if you had to look at this house, what are the vulnerabilities or potential entry points into this house? We're in South Africa, so we're very good at actually looking at this stuff and identifying entry points, I found. So what are the possible entry points into this house? If I wanted to break in, who could tell me? I shall wait the few seconds for the chat because I believe there's a delay. No one? All right, so if you have to look at this house, the potential entry points are like your windows, your doors, you go through the roof, you go through the chimney, you can tunnel underground if you really want to. And those are all like the potential entry points into your house. So that's pretty much identifying the vulnerabilities of this house, the potential entry points into this house. So what you've done there is you've actually done a vulnerability assessment, all right? But the only real way to find out if you can actually go through the chimney is if you climb up into the chimney and you look down the chimney, you're like, oh, wait, it's actually cemented over, which means that's not actually a vulnerability. It's cemented over. The chimney is just a decoration on the roof. So that's really the difference between a vulnerability assessment and a penetration test. Penetration test is I go to that house, I throw a brick through the window, I climb into the house, and I steal the TV and I walk out, if that's the objective of the pen test. If I climb onto the roof and I try to go through the chimney and I get cement, I'll see like, oh, this is actually not a vulnerability, this is a false positive. And that's really what you need to understand. Like I'm going to give you a list of a few tools that you can run against your application. You need to understand that some of them can give you false positives, vulnerabilities that don't actually exist in your application. So, and that's really if you want to think about in an easy to understand way, that's pretty much the difference between a vulnerability assessment and a penetration test. And using the exploit, the right exploit, because I think we've all seen those funny videos online where someone throws a brick at the window and it bounces back and hits them in the head. So that's a good example of like using the wrong exploit against the vulnerability. So that's pretty much it. But as some people mentioned, there's no steel bars. I can see all in South Africa. There's no wall around that house either, which is a bit worrying. All right, so if you have to look at, but yes, at the end of the day, once you've developed your application and you secured it, there'll be bars around those windows. There'll be maybe beams, maybe something to use to protect access to that house, access to the application. Security controls are going to block you getting access to the application. So I think it was World War II. This was quite a well-known thing. I think it's called survivor bias. If you had to look at so this plane would come back from the war and it's been all shot up. So there's like bullet holes all over this plane. All right. So if I had to ask you, which part of this plane would you now spend more time securing or, I guess, fixing to make sure that it will be more secure the next time it goes out into the war zone? What areas would you focus on if you had to look at this plane? I'm going to give it a few minutes. So again, just the question is like, if you had to look at this plane and you wanted to make it more secure or harden it against attacks when it goes back out again, which areas would you focus on? did you take it off, Ben? Oh, all right, cool. Okay, the wings. Someone says the edges, the propeller. Cool, so that's correct. I mean, so our bias with you'd almost want to say like, yes, let's harden the wings. Wherever there's dots, you want to go and secure those dots and put more things on there to prevent it from being shot. But the truth is, the plane came back from the war zone in one piece, which is what you actually need to focus on, is further securing those engines, the cockpit, and the areas that actually survived all that gunfire, because that's obviously your critical areas. The plane can get back to base if those areas are not hit. And if those areas are hit over there, like the wings, there's a few shots, it can still get back to base without being shot down. And that's really what security is about, is like focusing on your core critical areas that are going to result in your business or your application or your platform, whatever it is, from actually being able to continue. Especially if you're like a very big company or big corporate, you can't necessarily protect every single thing out there. So you need to focus on what the most important parts are. You need to focus on your engines, on your critical areas, to make sure that they're secure. Because a lot of times people will spend their time trying to fix things that aren't necessarily like the critical areas or the most, the areas that need to be focused on. And unfortunately, there's no unlimited budget and time. I'm sure some of us would like a limited budget and time. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about standards, which is an important thing that you need to understand as well. I think Steve touched on it earlier around looking at like the rules. What are the rules for your application or the rules for your projects, right? So there's different standards out there that exist that can be used for protecting data, for sort of like it's called like a guideline that you can use to secure your applications or your environments. So one of them is if you process card data, you need to follow PCI, you need to be PCI compliant. ISO 27001 is a very well-known standard for implemented information security management system, which ensures that you put certain controls in place around not just your technology, but like your vendor management, HR processes, everything. The thing with ISO 27001 is that you focus on a specific scope. So you can be like, only our critical applications are in scope. And then a lot of the times these standards, even though they're really, really good at getting things done, they almost get seen as like a silver bullet. So people do assessments against these standards, and they'll create these lovely little dashboards that you see on the right there with colors, green, orange, and then yellow, And they always say like these, and I've been in several meetings where people tell me that security is a journey. And, I mean, for sure, it's a journey. And but unfortunately, like the attackers and the criminals don't really care what part of the journey you're on, So they also don't care if you're 100% PCI compliant or 100% ISO 27001 compliant. They don't care if this dashboard is fully green. If there's a vulnerability in there, they're going to find a way in. And I think a lot of the times these dashboards get created by not measuring controls properly. So I used to have a slide with a boom where there's like a boom on a road, but you can walk around the boom on the grass, basically. But then someone put it on the dashboard like, yes, we've got a boom, check mark for access control, but like anyone can walk around the boom. So what's the point of the boom? But the boom is there, which means it will show up saying that it's been secured or it's there. But these standards are very good to like give you an idea of where to start. There's things like NIST that you can actually look at, as a good guideline, but it's not a silver bullet. You can't just say, we're judging you guys at ITWeb on the last day. You tell us, look, I follow ISO 27001. I'll be like, that's great. Like, it doesn't mean you actually will be secure. Have you measured the controls? Did you check are they actually effective? That's really where the difference comes in. So usually this happens. Some companies are very much compliance and governance driven. So they've got all the frameworks in place, they've got all the dashboards and think they're secure and safe, but no one actually went in to test their controls, which results usually in something like this. And big problems, and there's we're getting called in to now do pen tests. We get our friends from DFR to come in and do like forensics, but by then it's too late. So that's I'm going the wrong way again, keyboard. I'm not saying that standards are bad. I used to do ISO 27001 certifications. I was even certified to do that back in the day, and I used to do a lot of the stuff. So I actually understand why you need to have governance and why you need to have these things in place. Otherwise, technology and IT becomes like the Wild West. People just do stuff for no reason. There needs to be like a framework in why you're doing stuff. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying people are bad. So what is bad then? I think what's bad is really just not knowing where to start and how to bring it all together. And I think there's a lot of like education, a lot of training that needs to be done. And that's why myself and Steve and Ethan and Ivan, all of us actually spend time doing these talks to try and create that awareness, that people understand that there's a lot more to security than just running a Nessus scan, for example, or a vulnerability scan. There's a lot more to security than just becoming compliant against a governance framework. There's a lot of different things, but all these things are very, very important to ensure that your security posture is good in general, and you need to understand how they all fit in together. So there's some really useful resources for technical vulnerabilities. You can have a look at like the OWASP top 10. So the OWASP top 10 basically has a list of risks to applications, web applications, APIs, and mobile. For the hackathon specifically, for your application, I would suggest that you look at them. They touch on, they have examples, they have a lot of information around the type of vulnerabilities that you should consider look into when you develop your applications to make sure that you're not vulnerable to them. The CVE MITRE list as well. Again, like it's not just about your code itself, it's also about where you deploy your code. So make sure that you use like the latest frameworks, like PHP is up to date, your ASP is up to date, whatever it is that you're using is actually the latest versions, not really, really old libraries or components that are no longer supported, because that's going to be a big problem. You can use something like OpenVAS or Greenbones. Well, they work together because OpenVAS is more terminal, Greenbones is the UI, to actually scan your applications and your servers for vulnerabilities. So this is all free. So OpenVAS, we don't expect you guys to go buy commercial products to test your applications for the hackathon. W3F is another one. Burp Suite, the community edition, is also a very good one to test your applications with if you're doing web apps. And to just proxy traffic and do all sorts of cool things with it. There's also the exploits themselves. You can get them from Metasploit. You can run them, but just be very, very careful about how you run these exploits, because you essentially are deploying malicious code on that server or the application. And if you break something, I mean, you could cause a really big problem for yourself. Because especially if you download the exploit that's not from a vetted site, and you download some random exploit from GitHub, you compile it and you run it, and before you know it, you're part of a botnet. You need to be very, very careful. That's why I always say make sure you understand what you're doing, understand what you're running. Otherwise, it's going to cause an issue. You've got to download something, you've got to compile it, and then you're going to execute it, and then something's going to go wrong. A lot of times people contact us and say, my computer has been ransomware, I've got some virus on my computer, what should I do? The answer is format your machine. That's actually the answer. There's no way for you to know what that malware did on your machine. So if you go and you download an exploit and you run it, and the worst thing is when a black screen comes up, it disappears. You must know something's gone wrong, because you didn't see anything, but something happened. All right, so post-exploitation is really so if you look at that cycle that I spoke about earlier, post-exploitation is really the goal of your assessment. What are you trying to achieve? Like, are you trying to take data out of the environment? Are you trying to sit there and gather information? Like, for example, ransomware. I think we've all heard of ransomware. A lot of companies come to us and say, like, how do I protect myself against ransomware? The truth is, ransomware is just the end result of a whole bunch of things going wrong that resulted in that ransomware being executed on the network or the machine. It could have been something that was open on the network. Could have been something that got through the mail filter. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong for you to get that ransomware, deployment. So that's really dependent on what the goal is. And again, it comes back to your threat model and how you're going to actually think about the goal. What is the goal of the end goal of this penetration test or red team, or even for you in the hackathon? What will the attacker achieve? What will be the end goal based on your application's context? As I mentioned, understand your application, understand the context. It's a very important thing. So are we all doomed? No, we're not. We have information security, or is it cyber security? I know Steve touched on this, because if I ask my friends in the industry, they'll tell me if they want budget, it's cyber security. That's what they use. They use the word cyber security. Otherwise, it's information security if you ask anyone else. But as Steve mentioned, I think his definition was that cyber security is more focused around keeping cyber adversaries out and those type of attacks, which is true. Whereas information security is more focused on everything within the company. So you're looking at protecting not just your digital information or your cyber information, let's say, or your cyber assets. You actually focus on protecting printed information, access to the company, it's your HR processes, third-party supplier management, it's everything across the organization. But all these things come back down to confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is what we call the information security triad. It's been around for many, many years. I know people want to add like privacy as an additional one, which is fine. But it really just comes down to protecting information across its entire life cycle. So there's already a presentation around information security, but just to understand the difference is that information security is protecting everything across the organization. Cybersecurity is focused on the cyber domain specifically. But you want to look at your data and protect data around its whole life cycle. So a lot of times we find that organizations might not necessarily protect their archives or their backups, but they protect their data sitting in production. So for example, if you guys develop an application and you back it up to like an S3 bucket on the internet, and you haven't protected the S3 bucket, but now you just somehow someone wrote some code and you back it up all the time, or you publish your code there to protect it, whatever it is. And we come by and we find that backup and it's open. We'll have access to your application, all your code, and your data, whatever it is that you've put on there. Because you don't really necessarily think your application might be very secure, but if you're busy writing stuff to an external application that's not secure, or a container or something that's not secure, we'll be able to get access to it. So that's really what you need to consider. There are some other useful, interesting sites you can look at. One is privacy.net's analyzer. You can go there and actually see what information websites collect on you. Is this your computer, Ben? I mean, I could go there on this computer, but if you log onto any social media site, it's going to pick it up. Eh? I'm just saying, Ben, this is your computer. Can I do it?
No,
okay.
Come on.
Whose computer is it?
AT-West. So,
oh, Ivan, can I do it?
So we're recording you now. Facial recognition.
Oh, cool. All right, so just click on that then. All right, so privacy.net, it's not an application that I wrote myself. So, I mean, this is my disclaimer is that, if something happens there, it's not, even for this. But yeah, the whole idea is that they want to show you basically what data is exposed from your browser. All right, so if you come on here, it's also very good for you to know if you build your application and you want to make it focus privacy-centric. I mean, you must remember things like, I didn't list it on my slides, but POPI or POPIA, the Protection of Personal Information Act, in South Africa is very relevant to everyone's applications. So you need to make sure that you protect personal information if you collected it on users or whatever it is on your application. All right, so I will click on Start Test. It's going to collect my IP address, so everyone knows where we are. That's cool. In Johannesburg, basically the Chrome version and also our resolution of this screen. And the reason why they collect this information is that your screen size, your operating system, your IP address, all that stuff can be used to create a unique fingerprint of who you are on the internet. All right, so even if you think you're incognito mode or safe browsing mode and no one can track you, the ad tracking places and other places are collecting this information and creating a fingerprint for you that's unique. Because your IP address, even though it's dynamic usually at your home, typically unless, well, in South Africa, so load shedding could affect that. Your IP address typically doesn't change unless you restart your router or even when you restart, some ISPs issue the same IP address back. So that's pretty much the ISP. Now we go to autofill leak test. So pretty much, if you autofill information on the web application form and you save it for easy input later, any other application within any other website can access that information that you've saved for autofill. So no one's done anything here on this machine. Cool, there's nothing there. User accounts. So we do have someone logged into Gmail here and onto YouTube, which is Ben, because that's who I'm logged in as. But obviously, this site knows that Ben is logged into Gmail and into YouTube. Browser capability test. So this looks at things like the plugins that you're using, what features are enabled, things like that. And I can tell you that's also very useful for us, even when we do like very targeted spear phishing and things like that. We always pull information on what browser the target used, what plugins they have on the browser, versions, things like that. Because if you're using a very vulnerable plugin there's an exploit available. Just by visiting a link, we'd be able to compromise that machine through the browser if they're using a very outdated plugin or add-on or something like that. So you can see like all the different things. If I'd said, yeah, so like I hope this thing's up to date. Yeah, there's no Java plugins, which is good, no Flash Player, QuickTime, nothing like that. There's PDF Viewer. These are all the built-in, just from quick glance, that exist in Chrome. So it's already anything unique. And then we can just do a fingerprint analysis. So pretty much for this browser, this would be like the unique fingerprints, which means any other website can use that to trace what we do on this computer, basically. Unless I move this to the smaller laptop screen, which means the fingerprint will change. So yeah, that's an interesting site you can go look at and see like exactly what information any website can pull just from you visiting the website. Then you pass the test. GRC.com I already went through. URL Scan is a pretty cool site. You can, if you get like a link that you might think is malicious, you can submit it there. It will scan it for you and give you back a result. Again, just because the link came back saying it's safe or it's not malicious, just means it hasn't been picked up before. Because if I register the domain today and I wait like about 4 weeks or 2 months, whatever it is, and I send you a link, you can scan it on urlscan.io. Even if it's malicious or I do something dodgy on there, it's not going to get picked up because it's an unknown link. But URLscan is very good to pick up like links that are known to be malicious, basically. Although they do other scanning as well that might pick something up. VirusTotal also very good to like upload attachments, also URLs, things like that you might think of as suspicious or malicious. And they scan it with about, I think, 50 or so, last time I checked, 50 or so antiviruses will scan it. And they'll give you back a result that says malicious or not malicious and how many said it was malicious. And then just remember, if you are doing pen testing or you're an analyst, if you upload your payload onto here, it does get submitted to the vendors. So they could potentially, most likely, analyze it and create a signature for it, which means you've burnt your payload before you even started. All right, have I been pwned? I'll probably just touch on this one because it's have I been pwned is actually a nice website where you can go with your email address, type it in there. It will tell you if your email address has been associated with any data breaches and which ones. All right, so go on there, check your email address and see if you actually, yes, if you've had a breach that's been linked to your email address. You'll probably find, depending on how long you've had your email address and what services you use, you'll be on that list. Because LinkedIn, a few years ago, was breached, and a lot of people, because of that, you'll see they'll be on the list. And then penteststandard.org is a very good, detailed website around like how to do a pen test. And it's very detailed, just like instructions and steps. You can go there and check it out as well. It will help you with some guidance, along with like OWASP and things like that. And I think that's all my questions. Are there any questions? I'll give a few minutes.
So what we want to do to get Nathan back on, chat a little about the
Cool. All right. I'll just give it a few minutes, see if we have any questions, because I know Nathan went off just now, then there was questions after he left.
Perhaps you can answer his questions.
I can. What were his questions?
Is Nathan there?
Are you going to dial him in?
Yeah, I can bring Nathan in.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, how do we hear it?
Oh, so I mute the YouTube channel.
No. How is Danny going to hear it? You can hear it now from the laptop sound.
Oh, must I go to the streaming one? Okay.
Yeah.
StreamYard.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Very good. Did you hear that, Danny?
No, I didn't. Did you mute the... Oh, it's over here. Oh, no, he's over here, right?
Yeah, he's in StreamYard. I should be able to hear him just from here, unless it is using the screen sound. I'll just pop this out.
go. Settings. We'll use the mouse. Touchpad's always so.
Yeah. Stop the sharing.
How do we get in contact with you?
It would be.
Yeah.
They can reach out to you on Twitter. Yeah.
Manny, you can hear me, correct?
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay, excellent. So someone asked the question. Yeah, sorry, man, I changed devices, guys. Someone asked the question, what tools do we use at Snowd? So I'll just answer that question really quickly. One of the things about Snowd is that we develop our own technology. And so we don't use any sort of, generic tools or products off the market. Our tooling is all built in South Africa, and and it's provided to the rest of the world. And today, our South African technology monitors more than, not more than, just about 5 million devices across 6 continents in about, I think, just under 110 client points of presence around the world. One of the main reasons we do that is because the approach we use is unique, and I'd like to encourage everybody through this exercise to develop their capabilities, etc., because I think the ability to export South African talent doesn't just need to be in terms of people, but it can also be in terms of technology. I think the cyber landscape produces, there's very few problems in the world that have not been solved. And we're in a very exciting space where this is a global problem and it needs solutions. And I think that's what makes these hackathons extremely exciting, because it's an opportunity to not just put South Africa on the map, but Africa on the map, right? Because the digital landscape is one which, solutions don't require a lot of money to build, to create, and to take to market. Whereas 40 years ago, you'd have a storefront on, in Pretoria or in Johannesburg. Today, you're on the World Wide Web. So if you can build solutions, you guys can really have the opportunity to build technology that's used around the world. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to mention that on the tooling.
I think there's another question there for you, Nathan.
Cool.
I guess, how do we monitor for threats?
So Snowd essentially eavesdrops on communications, right? So for the technically minded, we connect to like a sniffer port and we look at ingress and egress traffic. And it's very much, it's comparable to an NDR solution in that aspect. We have something called a secure node, which is a sensor, and it understands all of that data. But in the same breath, the cloud platform has the ability to ingest all types of data, including social media, dark web, and all of those kinds of things. So what we do is we monitor for threats both internally to the organization by looking at the network behavior, but we also monitor for threats external to the organization by looking, at patterns of behavior on the deep, dark, and clear web. That kind of capability is a must in today's world, because I'll give you guys a very good example. When Donald Trump got became president-elect, the US focused a lot of their cyber efforts on securing voting stations. But ultimately, the Russians manipulated the US elections using mass cognitive influence and social media. So what we would call influence operations or psyops, psychological operations, and the ability to, I mean, that's what the cyber domain does, right? Is firstly, the perimeter is extremely porous, and I don't need necessarily to truly hack you to, like, for example, affect your share price, because if I can create the perception that I've hacked you and that your data has been leaked, or that I've defrauded you in some way, I affect public perception, and public perception is what drives your share price, and your share price will dip. And this is the new digital risk landscape we live in. Is threats come in all shapes and forms, and they're not necessarily always going to be inside your organization. So, we look at the threat landscape with a far wider lens, looking at everything from transactional data, so not just network transactions, but financial transactions, etc. And we use mathematical algorithms to detect anomalies, threats, fraud, and even user behavior that may be indicative of collusion, or a disgruntled employee, in the form of an insider threat. And I think that's the way threat detection across a lot of platforms is going now. Yeah. Manny, was that a suitable answer to that question?
Yeah.
You want to add anything?
It was my question. I think it was from Tindani in the chat.
No, I got it. But do you want to add anything to that answer?
No, I think it covered it all. I think it was good.
The CTF challenge, from a red team versus blue team, maybe you can just talk through that.
Okay, cool. So I just asking us to speak about the CTF challenge, how it's going to work. I think you've touched on it in your talk. I was driving while I was listening to your talk, but I think it's how it's going to work is basically from our perspective, we're going to create a vulnerable web application that can be targeted by the CTF participants. And the way it's going to work is that there's an application on there that will be vulnerable to some really basic stuff. You'll then get a flag as you complete each or exploit each vulnerability. Once you completely exploited the web application, you'll then gain access to a flag that will give you login credentials for an internal network. So it's going to be like a Windows type network with domain controllers and things like that, which you'll be able to then identify certain vulnerabilities. So the whole idea of the CTF is that we wanted to make it possible for someone that's never done a CTF before to do it and still have fun and enjoy it. And also someone that's done a few CTFs to also hopefully be challenged as well. And I think from the blue team perspective, I don't know if you think maybe correctly, but we did say we're going to put Snowed, like the Snowed agent, on the web application server. But I think you can maybe clarify on that, Ethan.
Sure, no problem. So I've put together a small slide deck. You guys can use this along with the slides that I've shown y'all today. So you'll notice that the attack tree we used, spoke about a VPN technology. So what I've done here is I basically we're going to do a design workshop today. What we're going to do is for the hackathon, we're going to put the Snowed platform in front of the red team's CTF challenges, and we're going to basically coach you guys on detecting threats and hopefully building some detections of your own. But before you build a detection of your own, I'd really like you guys in this session, because it doesn't require a lot of technical skill. So you don't need to code, you don't need to, but it's really a design desktop exercise. Part of the workshop is I want you guys to identify assets. Now you can use the Red Team's web application as an asset, for example, or you could use, an ATM or internet banking or an airtime platform or a, ESCOM. And what you need to do for me is you need to select 3 systems. And I've given you an example of a system decomposition diagram based on the attack trees in my first presentation. So what you guys will be able to see is, well, okay, how do I put together a data flow diagram? You guys don't need to worry about getting the UML stuff right and what's a shape for a decision and what's a shape for a document or what's a shape for a database, etc. But if you can understand the flow of information, the main core processes behind the application or behind the system that you want to you want to defend. And then what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to look at Stride. Stride is a mechanism of trying to break down different types of attack patterns that may be applicable to each of these systems. And I've given you guys an example there, like a valid login with a certificate, tampering with the integrity of data, repudiation, are you undeniably you, information disclosure, data leakage, denial of service disruption, elevation of privilege, becoming an administrator. Really simple, but you guys can understand that in the context of your system. The next thing I want you to understand is I want you to use the idle attack framework, identify the assets, define the attack surface, decompose the system in terms of a context diagram and a data flow diagram, identify the attack vectors using the threat modeling that both me and Manny covered, list the threats, perform some form of analysis on the likelihood of the threats being realized and which controls you'd put up front and how you would test those controls. And then just a list of controls that you would have in place to protect whatever system you choose to actually do the design on. I gave you an example of the attack tree just so that you guys remember at the root I want the attack goal. So if if you're using an ATM, I guess the attack goal is to get cash, right? So how are you going to get cash? Objective number 1 is you could possibly just mug the guy at the ATM. Objective number 2, maybe something more technical. You could try, an exploit on the ATM, for example, with I think some of the NCR ATMs used to have a USB port. You could plug in the USB and you could do what we call a jackpot attack, where the cash dispenser essentially just went crazy and started emptying out the ATM's cash. And the other thing is you could put a card reader, right, and a camera, and you could look at the pin and you could clone the card. I want y'all to go down the methods, go down to the leaves, and then design the defenses the way we covered in the presentation. And then I want you guys just to give me like 3 high-level findings. I think Tiani is going to give you guys the upload link. And if you guys send that, what we're going to do is we're going to probably choose 4 people for the blue team, capture the flag. Those people will get login details for a Snowd platform that's on the internet so that they can prepare, familiarize themselves with the platform, etc. And also what I'll do is I'll give you all access to our 24/7 SOC, where you can phone the analysts and essentially get a little bit of coaching on how do I build detections. And within the administration aspect of the platform, you can build your own detections, whether that's statistical analysis, machine learning. I'd stay away a little bit from AI because you're going to need some training data, like if you're going to use a neural network. What I'd stick to is figure out how to create signature-based detection first. So converting the IOCs that we spoke about at the base level of the pyramid of pain. Start with IP addresses, start with MD5s, move your way up to understand, be able to identify enumeration, etc. When the red team comes after the web application, they're going to scan using tools like Nikto, some of the tools that Manny mentioned. What I would do is I would run those tools past the Snowd system, or using Wireshark or TCP dump, whatever sort of analytical method you guys want to use. And I'd start analyzing and start identifying ways that you're going to detect, these enumeration tools. Try and use the red team's methodology against them. So I'll give you guys a simple example. The Nikto scanner actually puts the Nikto in the banner, in the host name. Although the red team can change that by default, if you run a default Nikto scan, it should pick it up. The next thing is when they enumerate for content, they're going to generate a whole lot of 404 internal server errors. If they perform SQL injection, you're going to be able to see that input, but you're also going to be able to see the response from the server side, right? Might generate a SQL type of error. And I think it was really interesting because one of the students was sort of saying, well, you're either white hat or you black hat. Or you red or you blue. Truth of the matter is, it's a little bit about what Manny said about foundation principles. I think the truth of the matter is, the guys who are really good at blue or red can play either part because they have the foundation, a strong foundation that regardless of red or blue defense or attack, they understand the principles of both. They can wear both hats, and you need to understand the attacker's mindset if you're truly going to want to be able to defend against them. So in my experience, the best defense guys, when it comes to threat detection, have a background in offensive security. And I guess Manny could elaborate on that. But like if I was going to hire a defensive guy, I'd go to Manny, because I know he understands the threats. I know he understands the tools. I know he understands the tradecraft. I know he understands the procedures. And that's really important. I think the question's not whether you're going to be blue or red and whether you're going to sort of learn one in isolation of the other. I think if you want to be good at what we do, you need to understand both. Manny, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, no, for sure, I agree. I think, like you mentioned, like you can only really, if you want to be like really good at like SOC or like really good at the blue team side of things, you just like understand how we go about attacking networks, how we go about using our tradecraft, to try and get these because a lot of the times you'll find that, or we'll find, we'll go and do like an assessment or test, and we'll find that the SOC analysts, they see the information coming through, but they don't really connect the dots and see like it's actually an attack. It's actually an attack that's going on. Even though they get an alert on it, they don't pick up that, this is like a password spray or an attempted fuzzing or whatever it is. They don't pick up that's actually an active attack, because they don't have that background or that experience from being an attacker. But likewise, on the other side of things is that, if you want to attack an organization or attack an application, you need to understand how these things are also protected, understand that the technology has been used to protect against attacks. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think understanding the foundations, understanding both sides is really the best way to becoming good. And you can go from one, and you can move from blue team to red team, and you've got more options, I guess, if you want to look at it from that perspective. And both are exciting. I know the hacking and the red team side always seems to be the sexy one. People everyone wants to be a hacker, but I think the blue team side as well. Stopping the hackers and stopping the attackers and the criminals also just as interesting, just as cool. So yeah, I agree with you definitely.
Guys, is there any more questions for myself and Manny?
We have a shy group. Tiani says we have a shy group, Nathan.
Okay, so anybody so I'm going to be online the entire day because I'm a mentor for the session. I'm sure Manny will also be available. But for anybody performing the blue team exercises and doing the design work, I want you guys to ping me if y'all have any questions or you'll need any coaching. I'll send you guys a Teams link. You guys can jump on the Teams call and I'll help you guys there. Tiani, is that okay? Or do we have a platform for coaching that you want to use specifically?
There is, but whatever works, because we just need to ensure that the guys are able to
get in touch.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Nathan?
Yeah, no, I got that. So guys, you can and Tiani, if they want to reach out to Steve, Manny, or myself, should we just give them our emails, or is there a better mechanism that they can use? Are we using a Slack channel that I need to get on?
It's called Sonke.
We using Sonke from Geek Culture.
Okay, fantastic, perfect. So guys, I'll see you all on that platform. Any questions you'll have, any help you'll need, I'm going to be available the whole day until the submission deadline.
Cool.
Thanks, Manny.
Thank you.
Let me close it off. Yeah. All right, guys. All right, so Sonke will be where we will be doing things, and just create an account there if you haven't. If you have been to previous hackathons hosted by Geek Culture, you should you already have an account there, so we'll just add you there. Someone says, can we get more clarity on the CTF competition?
That we just did.
Yeah.
Rewatch the broadcast.
Okay, so Ivan is saying rewatch the broadcast, but there is an exercise. We'll post it up on Sonke just to give you more guidance on that. And the submission deadline, because your team now has to write a 2-page document outlining that this is what we're going to be developing. Maybe do you want to quickly come back and... Okay. Oh, actually, that deadline is available on Sonke already.
Okay. Yeah, so Tiari's just mentioned that the guideline for the submission for the Ideathon will be available on Sonke as well. But basically, I'm just going off the top of my memory. So we are looking at like the problem statements. So like what problem are you trying to solve? Typical hackathon, what are you trying to address? And then how are you going to address it, the solution? And then we're also looking at the security considerations of your solution. So like a little bit of a write-up around, what frameworks and what things will be applicable to your solution and to what you're trying to achieve. And I think it's mentioned across the hackathon, material and things like that online, is that a big portion of how we're going to assess submissions, both for the hackathon and the hackathon itself being judged, 70% is focused on the actual security aspects of your solution. So what sort of vulnerabilities you should be considering, how you're going to test it, how you're going to integrate security. So pretty much all the stuff myself, Steve, and Nathan have covered during the day. I think that's it, yeah, but if the guideline is on Sonke, you can get all the information in there. All the detail should be there.
All right, so on Sonke, you just simply type /SS22 hack in small letters, /SS22 hack. Just by typing that, you'll actually get the guideline that I was talking about already. It's already there. And then to submit, you'll just type /SS22 hack, submit, and then you'll be able to submit your submission for the hackathon. And yeah, so if you have any more questions, do ask through Sonke, and we'll be able to get you the assistance. And then you can actually track the deadline. Type /SS22 hack deadline, and then it will show you the exact time for the hackathon deadline. And we are on a journey to the 31st to the 1st of June at the Centon Convention Center. That's where it will be going down. If your team has been selected to take part, you will get all the information. And that information is coming up next week, all of it. And yeah, so I'd just like to thank all the presenters from Ivan, Ben on the background as well. There's also Leslie managing the video with us here. You know, Steve is always saying that he has done this talk before, but it's always like it's the first time to me. But and then also thank you so much, Nathan, as usual, and a massive lecture from Manny as well. You know, yeah. So thank you for that. And with those words, we'll see you guys on the onlines. Do use the hashtag SS22hack just to give thoughts and your excitation around the hackathon. And also a thank you to the team at the NCDev ecosystem in the Northern Cape for the assistance, and also a massive thank you to Miss Mamabolo, the lecturer at Salt Lake University, for ensuring that the students are able to join in and be coordinated from that side. And with that, cheers. Have a great weekend.
A hackathon is an event where people gather to solve a problem. It can be technical, educational, social, artistic, or related to any field. The Security Summit 2022 hack will offer participants with training to up your skills in the world of technology.
Cause I be coding every week. When I'm down on my knees, I pray hard for the geeks. Cause I'm a geek.
Now, the hackathon has given us a theme of protecting the digital citizen in the fourth industrial revolution.
There's a lot of guys that have come from here that have actually got opportunities in the working place. They've gone from the hackathons. They're sitting inside organizations now, being ethical hackers, things like this.
The CDI that we had to exploit and then protect it from the red team exit.
So I'm participating in the ITO Security Summit, and this is my second year participating in the ITO Security Summit. So the first time I participated in the summit was last year. So my team and I have been working on a project.
When they need help with their hardware or programming, we come in and tap in there as makers and show them how it's done. Shout out to the hack guys, cool solutions, cool hacking.
Electric power, no time for flowers. We code for hours. Look at the things that we make. Look at the things that we do. They thought they were crazy. They start calling us fools. Cause when I'm down on my knees, I'll be praying for the geeks. I'm gonna take a to the coolest skin. Take the war. I'm gonna go to the coolest skin. Take the war. Cause it's a hackathon. Cause it's a war. Yeah. Cause I can call it every week. It's like it's it's like girls on set. Like it's woman is that. Like it's a geek. I'm a geek. I'm a geek. Are you geeks? Like we combine music with geeks. Take over geeks like making music. Why is